Karen Loftus, but we have Emma joining us. Thank you, Emma. Patricia Miller, Sandra Moore, Andy Purbeck, but we have Ed Rendell. Is Ed with us? Oh, good. Andrew Rosser, who's with us online. No. And we have some late joiners. David is going to join us later. It's Louise Bate and John Sloper. And I think we have a number of people also online. I can see Jenny, Rob. Hello, Rob.
Hello.
Hello. Do we have Councillor Jill Taylor online as well? We do.
Well, good morning.
Good morning, Jill. Good morning. Okay, and Nicola Bent? Yeah. Okay, not with us yet. So we've got still a few people to join us. Just a reminder that this meeting is live and is in public. So just remembering our language, what we say, and trying to use language that everyone will understand during the meeting. I'd also like to welcome to this first meeting Paul Reid from Magna Housing, who is representing the local enterprise partnership and as a business representative, but has a background obviously from Magna Housing. I can see Nicola's just joined us as well, so welcome, Nicola.
Morning, thank you. Nicola Bent, I'm the Chief Officer for Health Innovation Wessex.
Hello, and I can see Simone has joined us. Welcome, Simone.
Good morning, Simone Newell, Clinical Director and Deputy Chair, Dorset GP Alliance.
Is there anyone else online I haven't said hello to?
Amanda has joined as well.
Amanda.
Yeah, apologies, Chair. My plan has changed. I had to join remotely, but Amanda Pearson, Chief Constable of Dorset Police.
Okay. So can we just quickly go around the room just to say who else is here, just so everybody who is online knows who's in the room. It's not so easy to see sometimes. Kirsty, can we start at your end?
Yeah, of course. Kirsty Hillier, Deputy Director of Communications and Engagement for NHS Dorset.
Morning, everyone. Gillian Kay, Corporate Director for Wellbeing from BCP Council.
Morning, Councillor David Brown, the BCP Council Portfolio Holder for Health and Wellbeing and the Chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board in BCP.
Steve Robinson, Chair of Health and Wellbeing Board for Dorset and Council Holder for ASC.
Hi there, Andrew Billany. I'm Corporate Director for Housing and Community Safety for Dorset Council.
Steve Killen, Transformation Director for University Hospitals Dorset.
Rebecca Davis, Head of Skills for Dorset Local Enterprise Partnership.
Morning, everybody. David Freeman, Deputy Chief Exec in the NHS Dorset.
I'm Louise Trent, I administer the meeting.
I'm Paul Reid, Director of Sustainability and Investment at Magna Housing.
Sarah Chesel, Head of Innovation at NHS Dorset.
Morning, everybody. I'm Mr. Van Crow. I'm the Joint Director of Public Health for Dorset and BCP Councils.
Morning all. I'm Charlie Green, Chair of Dorset Voluntary Community Sector Assembly and Deputy Chief Exec at Active Dorset.
Everyone, hello. I'm Emma Lee, and I am Head of Engagement at Community Action Network.
I'm Liz Bearsall, Head of Corporate Governance for the ICP.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you. And do we have any declarations of interest for the agenda today? Nope, I'll take that as a no. So can we go through the minutes of the last meeting, which was held on the 22nd of October? And looking at the minutes, do we have any corrections or edits for those minutes? I'm looking around the room, there are none. So can we accept these as being an accurate record of our last meeting? Got a few nods, thank you very much indeed. And looking at the actions that we have in the action log, they are all indicated to be removed. So unless anyone has any suggestion that those actions have not been completed. Super, so we'll accept those. Thank you very much, Liz. That's first part done. So the first item on our agenda is to review our terms of reference. There are some small amendments made to the voluntary and community sector membership, and the addition of the local enterprise partnership business representative, who, as I say, we had Ian Girling for some time. Paul Reed had taken that position. Now, I usually think our terms of reference are quite straightforward, but then we have had some discussions about these in the past. Is everyone content with those changes as they stand at the moment? Good. I'm seeing nods on the screen and in the room. So thank you, Liz. I think we can enact those changes. So the next item on our agenda, and I think this is it Dave? Jenny's going to speak to this one. Thank you, Jenny. The item of the appointment of the chair and support the ICP. And I have been asked, and I will just like to say before this starts, that Jenny has kept me up to speed at all times with all of the discussions about this. There are no surprises, and I'm very content with the way that the process has been handled. So you can take that. So thank you, Jenny, if you would like to take the item forward.
Thank you very much, Cecilia. And I'd like to also say that I can bring David Freeman in also to talk about the support arrangements. The paper, I'll take people through, but as you indicate, Cecilia, the paper is proposing a change to how we do the ICP, how the ICP is chaired. So initially, I was the chair of the ICP as the chair of the ICB, the Integrated Care Board, for the first 9 months of the existence of the ICP. So that was from July 22 to March 23. And that was done by agreement, and we've covered that in paragraph 1.1. In paragraph 2.1.1, you will see the arrangements which followed my period of chair, which resulted in Cecilia Bufton being appointed as the independent chair, who remains the current chair of the ICP. And Cecilia's term commenced from April 2023 for 2 years, with the term completing in March of this year, 2025. In the run-up to this calendar year, both local authorities, BCP Council and Dorset Council, and the ICB have been in discussion about what should happen moving forward. You'll see that from the paper and what's been proposed, that both councils would prefer to move forward with the leaders for both councils jointly chairing the ICP. I should say that this is in line with probably almost all of the ICPs around the country. When we went through the process of having agreeing an independent chair process, there were no other ICPs in the country that were going through an independent chair process, because we did actually check with the network at the time. But we decided it was what we wanted to do, and we proceeded with that. Since that time, there has been one other ICP that has moved to an independent chair arrangement, but all of the others remain being chaired by the local government. And they do that in various ways. Some are joint chairs, some alternate also with the ICB chairs, but all local governments are in the lead in chairing the ICPs, with the exception of Sussex. We do think there's some benefits for that, because it does mean that the local authorities can actively lead the agenda. But if you were to agree to those proposals today, it does mean that Cecilia's term would come to an end at the end of March. And of course, I'm sure everybody would want to join me in thanking Cecilia. Sorry, I hope the noise is not putting everybody off from having heat pumps installed. I'm sure everybody will want to join me in thanking Cecilia for the time and the chairing of the ICP during that time. What the arrangements are suggesting is that the new chair arrangements would still be for a term of 2 years. So it would start with both local authority leaders, it's all right, both authority leaders chairing from April 2025 and for 2 years, but we would review that process within a year's time, so January 2026, see how that's going. In addition to that, we have also made some suggestions. Oh, sorry, we have taken the opportunity to review the support arrangements, because in addition to appointing an independent chair, we looked at what support arrangements might be needed. The paper sets out where we've got to on that review. Some of that has worked really well. Other bits probably need a bit of tinkering. But I'm sure David Freeman will be happy to come in and provide a bit more detail. And then the recommendations that we were hoping that the ICP would set out today are covered in section 3. And I'm happy to come back to those once David has talked about the support arrangements and once we've gone through it, any questions or comments that people have. David, shall I hand over to you?
Yes, thank you. So colleagues, I shall aim not to repeat too much of what's in the paper in the hope that you've had a chance to have a quick read of it. What we've been thinking about over the last few months, based on our experiences over the last couple of years, is about trying to find ways to bring more capacity and resource to support some of the work around the ambitions and work streams of the ICP. What we set out here is a proposal that's based on 3 levels. The 3 levels is just a means of describing the differences. It's not necessarily a model in itself. But what we've got currently, as we set out there, is basically secretariat support, agenda setting, arranging papers, taking minutes, maintaining the action log, and general governance advice. And that is, as laid out there, is being provided by the ICB, but the budget for it, the capacity for it, has been supported across the ICB and the 2 local authorities. And then also we've had Sam Crowe, who's been the executive sponsor for the ICP over the last couple of years, which has been a really helpful arrangement, because Sam has been running the single Dorset-wide public health service, which is, as you know, now under a change. What we'd like to do, so it's been quite clear talking to colleagues that we want the ICP to have more of a role, more capacity to do some work and running things like deep dive workshops, following up on some key actions, working with partners to make sure actions are followed up and things of that nature. And we've been reviewing those needs and looking at about what other people do up and down the country in the absence of a significant budget, I should say, to see what we might do to offer a different approach. So there's 3 things that we're proposing here. One is retaining the kind of level of executive sponsorship that we've had. It has been one of the strengths over the last couple of years to have had that support from Sam. And we think it's really important that that is maintained, and we have an opportunity through that to strengthen it. So there's 3 parts to that in itself. One is that I take a more direct leadership role in supporting this as the executive sponsor on behalf of the system. And then as we get, in fact, when I wrote this, we weren't clear on who was being appointed into the roles, but that's now becoming clearer. Once the Director of Public Health in BCP and the Director of Public Health in Dorset Council are confirmed, they will join us in that executive leadership role. And I think that's a really good echo of the proposed new chair arrangement. So between the 3 of us, not only does it strengthen the broad partnership work, it actually increases the capacity available for that kind of support. So that's level 1 proposal. Level 2, the project management. This is the new dimension that we're proposing here, where I've been looking at the capacity and resource in the ICB, and it's possible for us to release some capacity across our teams, or my team that I've got, which would include some bit of leadership, bit of project management and project support. And we think we could release that up to about 8 days a month, give or take, across the cycle of meetings. And we think that'd be really helpful to support the work of the ICP. The caveat, the challenge that members might want to consider is that that is the ICB providing that. And I'm conscious of the subtleties of that, which, you know, the ICP is not an ICB body, and we don't want it to be, and I don't think it would be helpful if it was. So I'm conscious that by offering that opportunity to utilise some ICB support, it will be in service to the system. If we want to really make it truly system, then a better solution would be for partners to contribute some of that capacity and resource, and we gather it collectively here. But we know how difficult and challenging that is for colleagues around the table. So the offer here is to draw some of that from the ICB on the understanding that it would be offered in system capacity. It's nothing to do with the ICB. We just have a bit of slack to be able to offer that. So colleagues may wish to come on that. And then the final change proposed is, as you can see, the ICP Secretariat, we have, through our experience over the last couple of years, we realised that we haven't needed a full level of support expected and set out at the beginning. We've managed to maintain it on a slightly lower capacity and lower utilisation. So we propose winding that back a little bit so that we don't lose any of the great support that we've had, but we're not overpaying for it. And so there's an adjustment there on that, as you can see in the paper. And then the financial implications of all of it. So in order to support the releasing of some of that additional capacity around project support, if that's agreed, then we're not asking for any additional money, but we'll just utilise some of the funding released by reducing the secretariat support. So the three things are expanding the executive sponsorship into this committee, spread across the ICB and the two local authorities, largely to echo the changes that now are being proposed around the chair. A second part is introducing the project management support, which we think is essential, and we have an offer from the ICB to be able to do that. But partners may wish to contribute collectively to that rather than the ICB do it alone. And the third recommendation is that to support that previous recommendation is that we reduce the capacity reduce the resource that we put in through the Secretariat because we're managing to do and service this committee on a slightly lower need.
Thank you, Jenny. So we are asked here to approve those proposals, but also to contribute to what David's just asked, if the proposal meets what people want to do, or if there are other ways that people. Steve.
Steve Robinson, portfolio holder, adult social care for Dorset Council. I would be very sad to lose the input and leadership that you've shown, Cecilia, but I appreciate also that times move on and times change. So just wanted to register our appreciation. In terms of moving forward, I would very much welcome opportunities for developing the partnership that exists. I think sometimes when you get into comparatively stratospheric levels of management, which the ICB and the ICP can sometimes be perceived of being, we need to have very clear, demonstrable outputs as well as outcomes. And so I think that opportunities for collaboration can only be welcomed and endorsed and so on. For Dorset Council side, we'd be very much in favour of developing that.
I think I can see Rob and Simone. Rob?
Thanks very much, Chair. So first of all, thanks to you, Cecilia. You really served us very well as Chair, and I think everybody's very grateful. And this is about making the best arrangements. It's nothing about your considerable capabilities and commitment. I think the recommendations are welcome. It's good to be in kilter with other areas where local government generally takes the lead. And we want local government to take the lead, and that's the direction of government policy anyway. So all of that seems very welcome to me. I'm also happy with the recommendations on ICB support and happy with the recommendations on Secretariat support. Obviously, if other partners wish to step in, that we could consider that, but I'm sure everybody's grateful, David, for the support that the ICB is willing to give. So thanks very much, Chair.
Yeah, fairly similar, really. Just Cecilia, thank you. I think it's been really refreshing to have somebody with a business background to give us a different perspective. And I suppose I would just like to make the point that I hope that we continue to keep that sort of the LEP input and have that sort of business sort of in the background, because I think they're really important when we're looking at how we deliver healthcare for the future. And just thinking about Sam's paper, when we're talking about, you know, self-care and prevention, and actually going into businesses and working with businesses, those partnerships are really important in the future. And I don't think historically, as a clinician, I've been very good at engaging with local business organisations. So I think it's really important that we keep those relationships going and develop them in the future. But Cecilia, thank you. You've been amazing.
This is actually quite good for me, isn't it? It's really well, but thank you so much. And I think you make a very strong point. This is obviously happening at the same time as the local enterprise partnership is again putting its functions into the local authorities. And I know that both local authorities will be developing business boards. Those business board representatives need to come forward into this meeting as well, and we need to work out how to make that happen. Thank you. Sam.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you as well. I think ICPs were a really interesting and exciting concept. Making them a reality is quite difficult in a very, very busy system, but I think you've done a huge amount of work to try to move us forward. I just have one question which relates to the terms of reference. We're obviously talking about support in this paper. Yes. We talk about executive support from the two new directors of public health, and I'm very happy to continue to offer that from my perspective when I take a post on the 1st of April. Do the terms of reference need to be amended? Because at the moment you're still showing the Joint Director of Public Health, and that organisation will cease in a couple of months. So if the partnership's happy, if we can make that amendment now, then we don't have to come back with a new set of terms of reference in 2 months' time.
A good suggestion. I think our terms of reference have changed pretty much every other meeting because again, we knew this was a fluid partnership. I mean, that's obviously been one of the strengths of it. So yeah, good suggestion. If this is agreed now, to actually take that forward. Can we do that, Liz?
Yeah, I was going to ask if we approve this suggestion, this proposal, that we look to make the changes that would support that. So that would be adding Millie as the council leader onto the terms of reference, and also to make those changes. But I didn't want to preemptively make them today. But if I can make them and take those as approved, then I'll get those up later. Thank you, Jenny.
Sorry, Liz has probably covered it. I was going to say that makes absolute sense what Sam has just suggested, and we will, of course, if the recommendations today are agreed, we will make those changes. There's probably just one additional thing to mention, which is I suspect everybody's aware of the devolution agenda that's happening around the country. And that there are likely to be 12 super authorities that will be moving forward. I know that the Wessex is one of those that has bid to be that. I think part of that process is that we will see some of the current mayors taking on responsibility for health. So it's quite possible when we review in 12 months' time that we might be in a different environment, and we'll need to think again then about what we're doing. But I think the move to both local authorities playing a greater role in the leadership of the ICP will support that forthcoming agenda.
Thanks, Jenny. David?
Yeah, just to say thank you again, and I think we've really benefited in that this sort of embryonic stage of the integrated care partnership, benefited from your position, from your chairing, and I've certainly appreciated that. I agree with the recommendations. I have one concern, I suppose. I know the leaders of Dorset Council and BCP Council, they're agreeable to doing this. I have some concern a bit that it's something extra for them to do, and the pressure of those roles, especially with the devolution agenda coming up, which will be, I don't know if it'll be distraction is the right word, but it will be, something extra for those leaders to sort of be paying attention to. I think it would be beneficial for them to be here, to be chairing, and to be involved in the discussions. But I have some concern about the pressure on their roles, and it's just something extra for them to do on top of the myriad of roles that they have as council leaders. And just to then formally say, following on from what Sam said about we have just last week formally announce the appointment of a new Director of Public Health and Communities for BCP Council. So that's Rob Carroll, who's the interim Director of Swindon Borough Council. So he'll be joining us on the 1st of April to be our first BCP Director of Public Health, but with the communities within this remit as well. I'm sure he'll be working very closely alongside his dad.
Well, that's great to hear. That's great to hear that progress, so that they will have someone in position, so that again it helps with, as you say, I think it is going to be a challenge with devolution, but actually I think one of the benefits that we've had as this partnership is having both housing leaders come to this meeting, both with Health and Wellbeing Board leaders coming to this meeting, the same with adults and children's. We've had a lot of collaboration across the place, which I hope will mean that when the new arrangements come in place, it should be more straightforward. They've got that piece already organised, so I think that should be quite good. And I think the proposal, sorry, I just wanted to say the proposals to get additional support and executive support for this are absolutely needed. I think I've been lobbying for quite some time for that, so I'm really pleased to see that come. Gillian.
Thank you, Cecilia. To echo what everyone said about your leadership and your convening and your support for us throughout this period. One additional point to David's. I wonder if this is as part of this sort of moment of reset, it's an opportunity for us to get real clarity about what we want to do together, Pan Dorset, at the Integrated Care Partnership level, and where that collaboration, sharing of experience, and working together can really add value. And what are the things that we want to keep and build on at the Health and Wellbeing Board, place-based partnership level. So getting those different layers in place. And it feels to me even more important to get that right as we're starting to think of a further regional level that may step into the health space. And how do we make sure that those levels of convening and governance are each adding some value to the outcomes that we're trying to achieve for our population, and not being in the risk space of meetings talking to each other. So I think this could be a great moment with the different changes that we're making, the two directors of public health stepping into that place space as well.
Gillian, thank you. You preempted. I had an AOB I was going to bring forward. I'm going to say it now. We've been having conversations, and probably just had them this morning coming into this meeting, about initiating some stock take work, some refresh work around the ICP and the ICP strategy in light of our experiences over the last 2 years and what we expect to see coming out of the national policy, both around the 10-year health plan, which we're anticipating might suggest ICPs need to be strengthened and the NHS needs to be a stronger role in that, as well as the devolution white paper. So I was going to ask members if you'd be agreeable to us starting some one-to-one conversations to get a structured conversation, just to get your insights and experiences and thoughts and opportunities along the lines actually that Gillian's just described about what you've experienced over the last 2 years and what you see as the opportunities and the challenges. And once we've completed that, we'll bring it back together into a further probably workshop format, although that's not agreed yet. And continue that development work along the lines that we're suggesting there, because there's a real opportunity in this phase as we come to the end of this business year, moving into the next year, inside those national policy changes, to really take stock of what the ICP can achieve and use new guidance and new statutory rules to sort of help us do that. So first step, we thought, would be a really good first step, would be to talk to the members and get your views and use that to inform and shape the further conversations and engagement work that we want to do. So building on what Gillian said, I hope that's an ask, actually, if you'd be comfortable with that happening.
Whilst I agree, obviously completely, it does raise the issue of, in a year's time, when we are now this new super authority, what will our relationship be with other ICPs in the other areas? Will then we be going through the same process yet again? And when does it ever stop? Would be my unthought comment.
That's often my thoughts. I must admit, but that yes.
But I have a response to that. So, Steve, I think you're absolutely right, and we don't want to go and do too much work in because of that very risk. At the same time, it's not going to change next year. So, what are we going to do going into next year to strengthen what this ICP is doing? So, if we were to interview you, and you said that to us, that come through in the feedback, and we take a balanced view about how much change, how much development we want to do. Bearing in mind what we might expect to see coming through nationally. So I think that's a fair point. I think the goal has to be what next for us, and then how much do we do, pending that potential risk that we go too far and we have to row it all back again.
Very comfortable with that, but just worth noting.
Leslie and then Jenny.
Yeah, again, just to echo my thanks, Cecilia. I just think to Gez, it was also new to everyone, just helping us navigate the path. I think has been really important. So thank you. I really welcome the proposal. I take the point about what's going forward, which I guess if the leaders of the council are helping lead it, we'll be hopefully well sighted on what might be coming around the corner. But I think in the end, we've got a job to do locally, haven't we? And we can see what the communities and local communities are going to have to start to drive this, because we can't keep waiting, as we'll come to the public health paper later. And I think it's sort of about the unit of currency is going to have to be multi-layered, as you said. But we can't get away from the fact that developing those strong community interventions has got to be, way forward. I don't think anybody in rural Somerset is really going to help us do that, frankly. I can't see that's going to be helpful. So I also welcome the sort of business input, and I can bring what I can from the Dorset Skills Board, which is really refreshing, because obviously we're trying to develop from a university perspective workforce, not just for the NHS, but for social care, for the wider picture, and all the private providers as well that are kind of coming through and about to probably be developed more fully within probably an increasingly mixed economy sector. So keeping that visibility, I think, is going to be really key. So thank you.
Jenny, do you want a last word on this one?
Yeah, if I may, and it was really just to add to what's already been said, which is that there is a body called NHS Confederation, which actually provides a network for ICP chairs and leads. Cecilia has been very well represented on there. It's the network itself is actually chaired by a leader for one of the councils, and they do a number of things, but one of the things they often do is keep abreast of what's happening nationally, and also have the opportunity to kind of influence and put their voices in. So I would suspect that our leaders would want to be represented on NHS Confederation, and hopefully will be in a position where they can keep us informed of what's happening nationally, but also share their experience to make sure that whatever changes come forth are not going to be things that will be to the detriment of Dorset.
Yes, NHS Confed has been really helpful in that, and they do liaise well, obviously, with the Local Government Association and the County Council network. So I think they'll help. So we've got this here to approve the proposal. And I'm hearing that everyone is content with the proposal, so I think we have approval for that. I think again there's a lot of people saying thank you very much for the offer of the support, but obviously the potential to get that again. I think it's still there, so the opportunity to do that. Thank you, everyone. I think that's been really helpful, and obviously moving on to a new way of working. And thank you all for your very kind words. I think that's been rather remarkable. So thank you very much indeed. So if we can move on to our next.
Cecilia, I'm so sorry. I put my hand up. So just before we finish that, I just wanted to. I know we've said it already, but if we can make sure that the minutes formally record our thanks to you as the chair over these 2 years. It's not been an easy year. You've got us off on a really good start with the launch of the strategy, etc., and ensuring that we have the wider commercial and other voices around the table. So I just wanted to make sure that we formally record that, even though it's not one of the recommendations. Thank you very much.
Here.
Thank you again, everyone. Thank you. That's great. So our next item is looking at it's called a population health deep dive, and it's a reprise of a paper that Sam gave to the ICB board. But I think it really it's useful for this meeting as well, because it helps explain the primary and secondary prevention, which I think sometimes is a very confusing set of terms as well. Contextualizes the impacts of those alongside obviously those longer term works that we're also then be coming on to discussing after that, which are housing, the economy, employment, and all of those sorts of things. So if I can hand over to Sam, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. So good morning, everybody. I wasn't expecting to give this presentation to the ICP, but Cecilia asked me if I would come along and share the presentation, because I gave this to ICB members last week, mainly because I've been asked to do a presentation working with ICB colleagues on population health. Where are we? It's obviously a huge question, so we try to focus it in a little bit and to demonstrate how population health does change, but it does take quite a long time. But then I wanted to go on and start to focus the conversation for ICB colleagues on what should be the NHS's role. So if you're going to focus down in a very crowded agenda, where would you look and what would be the big questions? Of course, the other side of that coin is where should the ICP be focusing? And it picks up on Gillian and David's points about how do we have a clearer separation of some of the really important things to do at scale in the integrated care partnership and allow each of the places to continue to deliver. So bear with me a second. I'm going to share my screen and present. I'm a bit reliant on the GovRome network. It didn't work that well last week, but let's see how we get on. And Cecilia, if you've got an idea roughly of time, I'll make sure that we keep to that. So there's plenty of time for questions.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if you can cover it in about 10 minutes, I think that would be
no problem. This is an abridged version. So first slide is just to set the context. Hopefully none of this will be a surprise. I've always felt when I've been Director of Public Health across the two areas, that actually one of the challenges has been that there aren't many areas where when you look across the whole of the population, we're not doing as well or better than England. But Dorset and BCP Council's challenge has always been that there are lots of people living in parts of our system who don't experience as good outcomes. So that inequalities dimension is really, really important. And if you're only going to do one thing, trying to bring the health and the health experience of those parts of the population up to the level of the middle and the best, then that would be a very good gain for our population. But looking forwards, I think one of the interesting things about the move to place-based working is I hope it will give the two directors of public health more of a chance to focus on some of the different opportunities in each of the populations. I just pulled up the two chief medical officer reports from the past 2 or 3 years. For Dorset Council, we are at the forefront of what it means to be living in an ageing society. So not looking at that in a negative way, but how can Dorset Council start to think about making Dorset a great place to be entering the third age and all of those opportunities and assets that older people can bring. On the left-hand side, I think that CMO report on coastal health is really important for BCP Council. BCP Council is quite a complex population. Parts of it are ageing, but parts of it are also growing, and they're very young, connected with the universities and the fact that more and more people are choosing to stay and even start new businesses. So it's a complex dynamic, but there is a knot of quite entrenched issues that affect people linked with really, really poor quality housing and low cost housing units. Naturally, that attracts people in who've had a poorer experience, an overrepresentation of people who struggle with mental health and addiction issues. And that's what you see very, very visibly in some of the more deprived areas. So it's an interesting population. Looking ahead, Health Foundation's done some national modelling. None of this will be a surprise. More of us are going to have long-term conditions. Part of the population will start to develop those at an earlier stage of life. Governments are already commenting on this in terms of the overlap with the impact on productivity and working age adults. So that will be a big focus of government. So against that kind of policy backdrop, with the NHS also reviewing its 10-year plan, I asked two questions of the ICB. What are the greatest opportunities to improve population health against this context for Dorset ICB? And then what should we be focusing on in a crowded agenda? Because it is tempting sometimes to think that we're doing everything. I think this is a really important slide. This shows a mixture of admissions for coronary heart disease. It's in the BCP Council area. It's a mix of emergency admissions and elective procedures. When I first came into Dorset as a public health trainee, I became a bit obsessed with this because I thought we were doing far too many cardiology procedures compared with similar age populations. And I wanted to understand why. Was it that we had this untreated epidemic of coronary artery disease? Or were the clinicians making different choices? And instead of managing more people medically with more conservative approaches, we had the introduction of a new technology at the time, drug-eluting stents, and the aspiration of the hospital was to become one of the leading centres for this technology. But as a public sector commissioner, I was concerned that maybe we were possibly over-providing this. And you can see back in the early 2010s, about 3,500 people a year were going through that centre and having a mix of emergency and elective procedures. All stents, they don't do any coronary heart surgery. But some things happened since then. You can see the most recent data point. In terms of numbers, in the last year for which we had data, the hospital admitted around about 1,000 people, compared with 3,600. So the lesson from this is that you can see this is a similar data for Dorset Council. Issues do change over time. I don't think it's been a change in pathway or treatment. You can still receive the same procedures at Royal Bournemouth Hospital. I don't think the clinicians are working differently. As a Director of Public Health, I will claim this. I think it is due to change in risk factors in the population. So what's happened? Smoking prevalence has really fallen. And it's also fallen in some key groups who are now getting the support that perhaps they would never have come forward for NHS smoking cessation services 10 years ago. But things like the introduction of screening everyone in a hospital in an inpatient bed for their smoking status, rolling out that treating tobacco dependency programme, and the cultural shift to vaping as an acceptable solution and an alternative to smoking has been hugely dramatic. At the same time, believe it or not, physical activity levels in the population have increased, but probably some gains from those two changes may be offset slightly by the gain in weight in the population. But I think the point is that these small changes at the population level, when you add them up, they become magnified over time. And you can see in this instance how the pattern of disease has really changed across the two councils. Now, all of this was predicted by a group at the University of Liverpool back in the early 2000s, who basically ran the numbers for England and said the biggest impact on coronary heart disease isn't going to be from technology change. It's absolutely going to be change in behaviour in the population. And that's what we see. So my question is, what other conditions could be reduced or mitigated at the population level if we could do similar things at scale and start to make impact on some of those risk factors or care models? And then we walked through an issue that I'd brought through both health and wellbeing boards 3 years ago or so, which is the issue of strokes. So we looked at stroke admissions. At the time, remember the context was just after the pandemic. Dorset ICB was the 7th highest ICB in England for admissions due to stroke. This is age adjusted, so it's not because we have an older population. We shouldn't really have been in that position, in my view. So we started to use that to drive action on the ground, linking with the national strategy around identifying people with high blood pressure, and more importantly, making sure that people were being treated appropriately to target. And we weren't performing very well on that measure as a system. So partly because of the lack of face-to-face contact in primary care, lots of people who had high blood pressure hadn't really been reviewed, and we had big gaps in terms of the proportion being treated to target. This is what's happened to stroke admissions over time across both councils. We've kind of been better than England for long stretches of time, but you can see in VCP Council, because of the pandemic, because of that lack of contact with primary care, no surprise, I think admissions went up, but luckily they're starting to come down again. Question is that as a result of better identification and control of blood pressure? Data that we have suggests that we are starting to improve. So when we first started looking at this intensively, of course, again, was the fourth worst performing area in the country for control of hypertension. But over the past 2 or 3 years, with lots of concerted effort by lots of people across the system, that's turning around. Now about 71% of people with hypertension are treated to target. It's still 9% off the 80% government target, but it is an improvement. And this just shows you what that looks like across some of the different groups in which we measure inequalities. And actually, it looks as if we are making inroads in terms of the oldest age groups. Sometimes people are reluctant to control hypertension tightly in older age groups, but the data shows that that's not the case. We are making some inroads into some of our local groups as well, particularly in some of the ethnic groups where control is improving. But it's just the start of that challenge. And this shows you the position of Dorset ICB and how it's changed over the past 2 or 3 years. So as I said, at the start of this focus, we were 4th worst in England. We're now moving up towards the middle of the pack. And I've heard the clinical leaders express an aspiration that they want to be among the best integrated care boards in the country. So it is, again, it shows you that when there's a real focus in the system on something and you can pull levers at different levels, you can actually achieve change. And a lot of this has been supported by an incentive framework which incentivises primary care to go out and find people and to make sure that the control is better. I believe the chart on the bottom is very, very small, but this shows you early signs of a promising impact on inequalities. So this is the group that are living in the most deprived area that are starting to improve at almost the quickest rate. So just moving on to what are the opportunities to work differently. I think this system has some unique pieces of the jigsaw. So the first is that Dorset Insight and Intelligence system, which is the system based on primary care data. It enables people working at different levels to identify who may be getting better care, who may be getting worse care, and for you to then re-identify that cohort if you're working in a practice and understand how to invite people in, how to engage people differently, try to understand what's happening on the ground. The aspiration to build integrated neighbourhood teams with different types of resources, I think, is really important. So the bullet points that I've put underneath the systematic approach, it's really simple, but I wonder sometimes why we keep inviting people in for reviews who are very, very compliant. You know, they will be buying their own blood pressure monitor in Boots. They'll be joining all sorts of online groups. We don't need to spend as much time with these people. They're doing it for themselves very nicely. The people who are struggling to achieve control, there's something about not medicalising this issue. So adding in more and more blood pressure drugs is generally not a good thing. What else are they struggling with? Is it weight? Is it alcohol? Is it salt? Is it physical activity? So having more people around in these teams to offer a different approach as well as the clinical care is really important. The people who are uncontrolled but not engaging, we really need a different approach, which is much more focused on what's going on for them. There are other groups and organisations outside of professionals who are sometimes very, very good at this work. So we need to think about building those into those teams. And then finally, people that we don't know about, the best way of reaching out is not through professional leads, but it's usually through trusted networks. So how can you reach some of these people through friends and family, through kind of online networks? I know both comms teams in the NHS and also in public health have done some quite nice work based on social network theory to reach some of those groups. And I think my final question to the ICB was, what more can you do around elective care reform? There's a bit of a tension at the moment because the NHS 10-year plan is saying prevention, leftward shift, hospital to community. Meanwhile, Secretary of State's getting hammered for waiting times, and elective care reform is going to be a continuing theme. So what can you do around waiting well? And using that opportunity to engage with people, again, not over medicalising it, but supporting people to wait really well. And Charlie's organisation and Liberal Dorset have both had experience in and around this through the Outpatient Assessment Centre. I don't think it's perfect. I think getting the clinical buy-in to that model is really, really hard work. Not when it's easy, but when times are hard in the system and everyone's being encouraged to support what's going on in very, very busy hospitals, it's really hard to get people to engage with that kind of model. But I think it's worth looking at in the future. And then where should we focus in a crowded agenda? Remember, this was for ICB colleagues, so I think the absolute priority has to be secondary prevention at scale, using tools like DICE, the neighbourhood teams, to really go after where people aren't doing so well, give people the control, make sure that that approach is genuinely person-centred, and if nothing else, be prepared to have the time to have proper conversations about why the current approach might not be working for someone. Driving down inequalities, as I've said, I think this is the area with the most potential for health gain. And then something we don't talk about a lot, you mentioned primary prevention. What does that mean? It's some of the upstream drivers of health and well-being. The single most important thing we could do is physical activity. If anyone's been listening to radio interviews around the NHS and weight loss jabs, it's really fascinating because I hear clinicians coming on the radio and saying, well, this jab has been linked with the reduction in 42 health conditions. And I'm like, but so is physical activity. And we don't think about that or talk about that in the same context as almost like a miracle intervention. If you could just get people to be more active, it's been shown time and time again in big population studies to have huge benefits for the whole range of conditions that we might be at risk of developing. Wider determinants are really important, and here's where we break into maybe an ICP conversation. If government is really serious about putting more money through devolved areas and through mayoral strategic authorities, then some of the conversations that we've had in this ICP around social mobility, economic development, the importance of providing really high quality housing at scale, could become an interesting focus for an integrated care partnership, which nicely partners with the focus on secondary prevention that the NHS can have, mainly because the NHS has got a high degree of control over some of those areas of its business. So I think that's nearly the end. This is just a reminder of the time periods over what I've been talking about. So the blue triangle on the left is the kind of time period we're talking about delivery of gain through secondary prevention approach. The middle bit is what you might expect if you're improving people's behaviours through primary prevention, like increasing physical activity. And the longer term is some of the change that happens over a generation connected with improving social mobility, improving opportunity, improving the economic outlook for people. So it does take a long time. And this was the final slide. This isn't one of mine. This came from the ICB team, just to kind of trail what they're thinking about in terms of relaunching a prevention strategy for the system, which would start to focus much more on secondary prevention, because it's the thing that you can do quite quickly that can make a difference quickly. And through that work, you can then get into conversations about, and how is the rest of your well-being and your lifestyle. And then the wider determinants bit is shown at the bottom, not because it's the least important, but because it takes the longest period of time. It should be the base and the foundation to creating a sort of the opportunity to be as healthy as possible, but recognising it's a more complex partnership space. Perhaps it's less easy for the NHS to influence over a short period of time.
Thank you, Sam. Again, unless there's any questions about it, I can see Simone has a question. It's more of a medical question, and really this paper was here to set the scene and to actually just showcase how the work of the ICP and the communities and the behaviour and the wider determinants sits alongside the ambitions and the work of the ICB, and that they're not disconnected, and that really people are thinking about how all of these things do interconnect. So I can see Simone does have a question.
Thank you. Apart from that, in the chat, I think there are so many things that go around in my head, and I think it's really important to reflect that population health management really is about the health and well-being of the person, and that we know that health only is a small percentage of that well-being element, of that total overall well-being, and it's actually how we make sure that we always include the socio-cultural economic perspective when we're thinking about our population. I suppose that was the first point. The second point about when you were talking about hypertension, absolutely, and this is, I think, my point about making sure that we work in partnership with other organisations and local businesses, because a lot of those people that are in that uncontrolled or unidentified groups for blood pressure, as an example, are those that are in the working environment, and so actually partnering with local businesses to ensure that they're offering support and actually encouraging integrated neighbourhood teams, primary care networks to go into those businesses and actually offer blood pressure checks within those environments, because often they don't have the headspace or the time to actually make an effort to get to a local practice or to buy a blood pressure cuff. They might not be able to. So I think that was those points. My third point is actually about I think something we're talking a lot when we're looking at measuring outcomes for integrated neighbourhood teams, and actually it fits with this as well, is about patient activation, and actually how we look at how we can activate people to look after themselves more effectively through self-care and prevention. And I quake in my boots when we start talking about injections for weight loss, because it's actually much more fundamental than that, and it's actually about lifestyle changes and getting people on board. And I suppose it was just to highlight the fact that how we can support the ICB, and they're doing quite a lot of work to move away from the bean counting of how we look at success in healthcare as, reduction in hospital admissions and intervention as opposed to sort of outcomes in improving patient activation. So I think that was my thoughts. But I think obesity is something that we need to be thinking about, because we know that actually if you can reduce obesity, your health outcomes are so much better in the long term. But thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Simone, as well. Thank you. All good points. Anyone else?
I'd just like to say well done, Sam. Yeah. I mean, that's actually a really, really big achievement, given everything and where we've been in with COVID and everything. So I think, I'll take my hat off to you. It's a complicated area. And I guess it's just to sort of, we're all in this together. And there is something like Active Dorset, stepping up, the ECS is stepping up, and across the council, so we can see what's going on. As an example, with the minor, healthcare student workforce we've got, we're knocking off waiting well lists. Referrals coming from GP surgeries that will have to go for MSK care, and just stranning them through. We're taking, tariff to train those students in those hubs. I think there's so many models that we can bring to this if we can see those touch points. Rather, like Simone said, that's part of that sort of patient activation. A lot of these people that we see already activated more than people that we don't get to see. But the sort of the hubs that we held in the communities, obviously getting people that we don't get to see. But there is this kind of workforce that we've been able to do a bit of work for NHS England, looking at how we can almost optimise the value of the student workforce around this. Not to replace, of course, but to supplement and add value where we can. Because actually we can't get, there's not enough places. So it feels like a kind of perfect storm of offering that. And we've worked, obviously, that's at Dorset Live Well to supplement again that and just add some extra capacity really throughout the year. So I think that's something to perhaps consider in this space, because it's not highly complex often, advice giving, dietary advice and everything else, but actually sometimes it's more than a quick chat. Sometimes there's a bit of a follow-up or following a programme for certain individuals could make all the difference. So I think, as I say, it's everybody putting into the pot, but I think we come up with some very ingenious solutions if we keep having the conversations.
Green, how do we make that available to everybody? I've got Steve, Jenny, and then Steve.
Yeah, I'd endorse that recommendation. One thing you didn't mention was dementia, which is, I spend quite a lot of time at the moment with people who are living with dementia in various stages, and it's a great fear that many people have got. Also, loneliness was something that I would probably add into a causal part, and the encouraging people to make healthy choices. We've talked about community mobilisation, which is a big theme for mine, but also the importance of when we're trying to engage with groups that don't normally engage with traditional methods, finding non-traditional methods, trusted local partners who are not necessarily GPs that can provide that. And I think so a lot of the work that we're looking at doing fits into that agenda. We just need to bring it together into the rather than have silos.
Jenny?
Thanks, Cecilia. As you mentioned and Sam mentioned, we saw this at the ICB last week, and clearly it's a big ICB agenda. The power for me, though, of it coming to the ICP is the support around the kind of future trajectory of not medicalising everything. And I think Sam's example about injections for weight loss, the physical exercise and what people eat is a powerful example of that, isn't it? And so I think that's where the strength of the ICP can come in. So if we can really think about the ICP, how we bring together the partnership around that kind of medicalization of issues would be really helpful.
Thank you. Steve Killen, Transformation Director for UHD. Sam, really enjoyed that. And it was really interesting to watch and look at what you're presenting, because when we started the clinical services review 10 years ago, that's exactly what you were saying. And now to have the evidence and look back, and that journey of dropping off is really good. I think probably the bit that I would then say is about that strategic commitment. If David was here, it's about how do you kind of keep a journey and keep many partners on the journey, because that happened for Dorset and we're starting to kind of build on that again. And where you're saying it's about stroke and it's about the next thing, we've got to be careful not to flip-flop between things, because it's kind of having that consistency and that joined up partnership is where you'll get the change. So really great piece of work. Nice to see it come through.
Maybe a last point from Charlie.
Thanks. Yeah, it's the second time I've seen that presentation, Sam. It's great, and I would be an advocate, because working for Active Dorset, the references to physical activity I'm really supportive of. I think two things for me as a system: the risk we sometimes attach to physical activity presents a huge barrier for people. There's a lot of work happening nationally about risk of physical activity, and when we're talking about people with long-term conditions, the risk is much more to being inactive than being active, but that isn't how people feel, both patients and clinicians. So I think we've got some work to do in that secondary prevention piece around risk and the narrative we present to make that feel like, for patients and people, how do they feel about moving, physical activity, what barriers are in their way. And secondly, I think for the ICB, how we design in movement, physical activity, those lifestyle nudges. It's a complex thing, behaviour change. It often takes lots of different nudges and lots of different elements. And I think for us all, when we're designing community services, building new housing, how do we think about the long-term effect of how we create those spaces? So either going to present more barriers to moving and being active, or give more opportunity. Thanks, Anne.
Thank you very much. I think, obviously with the new Director of Public Health as well, and yourself, Sam, this is obviously why you're driving this agenda for us, because it is just so powerful, and exactly that non-medical side. I'm going to have to move us on, because we are getting short of time, as we always do. Can I ask that we move into it? It segues so well into those conversations about housing, about employment, and about getting things. Can I ask Andrew, and is it Ben who's
yeah,
Ben? Hello, Ben. So welcome Ben to discuss with us where we've got to with the housing strategy. Did you have?
Shall I kick off, Cecilia?
Yes.
Thank you for that. I mean, I've been before, so this is very much a double act with BCP, but also particularly what I'm going to tease out today is the strands of conversation we've been having here, but also the housing roundtable, as we're still calling it, that is pulling together interested parties from across the Dorset system. That includes, obviously, Amanda on the call, Bid Black Police, University, other
other people interested in this topic. So what I'll do a quick run through, just as some extent an update of progress, but also just to tease out any further thoughts people have here, because there's lots of relevant change going on at the moment, including devolution, which may well impact and give us opportunities around housing and health. So I'll do the bulk of it because I've been doing the work on the housing round table, but we'll draw Ben in when there's particular points around what we're doing within BCP. So okay. As I say, we've been meeting to, chaired by Matt Prosser, Dorset Council Chief Executive, but representing across health, particularly, but other sectors. We've been meeting for a while, and we're at the stage where we're recognising there's been lots of vibrant, highly useful conversations around housing and health, but there's lots of them. So we've particularly focused in recent months into focusing and prioritising where we need to address our attention. So the strands of work I wanted to tease out today, and we'll go into a little more detail in the slides, is there are three particular strands of focus which I think are relevant to the discussion we're having here, and we're much more able to focus on outcomes and move things forward. The first box is around a very broad topic of housing standards and solutions. The evidence from comments here as well as through the round table, that a large part of our focus around housing and health is going to be around people who have acute health conditions, social care needs, supported housing needs, and a range of links. So that piece of work is to recognise the work recognise activity that's already going on, encourage it, and bring it together into that wider strategic oversight that we have at meetings like this. And on going after Sam, I think any good housing director is very driven by social determinants of health and public health drivers to this. Drivers of this agenda. It's very welcome. So the link with housing standards and damp and mould, overcrowding, cold access barriers in existing buildings has got to be an emphasis of all of our work to make sure we're using existing stock to its best. For its best purpose, and also to make sure there's proper matching of people's housing needs to that stock. Because what I'll go into in a minute is a lot of the discussions here has been around new build housing, which is important. But just on the social housing stock alone within the Dorset Council area, there are 25,000 existing homes that people live in, and they need to go home to after hospital, and they live in becoming ill because they might be overcrowded. So it's those aspects are recognised as important, and making sure we're doing all we can to coordinate how we provide our services across our system. Second box, again, I'd say it's piecemeal, but good progress around that principle around looking when we have sites for new housing development, make sure we're looking at health outcomes and health needs as a key part of that. But that includes health needs, but also key worker opportunities. So there's been good progress, and Ben may have examples from BCP, but I know that with Steve sat next to me, there are good initiatives that Dorset Council are doing in Bridport, for example, care and extra care for older people and people with support needs, and various strands of new build development around supported housing and more extra care in other parts of our county. So these discussions do influence that, because it's recognising that we've got our statutory responsibilities as a local authority in BCP, but we're doing all we can to make sure we have a balanced approach to the development of sites wherever they come. So that's picking up pace. So I think there's good progress in that sense. And the third point, just to tease that today, because it's where the housing roundtable started. The constant challenge of recruitment and retention, the key worker piece, is something also that's staying as a priority of the roundtable. Could well be the solution. They could well be achieved through other means, such as employment practices, pay and conditions. But we recognise that there is a there is a role for the affordability of housing within that strand. Now I'll give Ben a chance to come in on here, because this is really gives you a snapshot. I'm not going to go through every one of these, but gives you a snapshot of the work that is going on around that wider that general heading of housing standards and solution. So if you want to pick out any of those, Ben, just from BCP.
Yes, Ben Tomlin, I'm Head of Strategic Housing at BCP. So I think it's important just to recognise the context around the emerging legislative changes that are coming this year in the private rented sector in terms of renters' rights bill, because it extends the response, will extend the regulations around issues with respect to damp and mould, housing condition, and will introduce additional enforcement interventions that the local authority can take on poor conditions of properties. But also it's introducing the local an ombudsman role where residents can challenge landlords around stock condition. There are some examples of good preventative work happening already around social housing stock landlords and some private rented landlords around inspections, visits, energy efficiency interventions, and Ridgewater Energy provide residents locally with advice and landlords advice around energy efficiency. There is some specific work with respect to addressing the overall additional housing need demands that both councils are seeing, increasing numbers on housing registers related to some of those, a number of those housing standards, but specifically around specialist housing. So what we have in terms of housing demand, and we're seeing this nationally as well, silting up of our exempt and supported housing, lots more people in inappropriate accommodation without an affordable housing solution to move on to, and therefore an increased pressure around temporary accommodation, emergency accommodation for people leaving a range of institutions, the private rented sector, overcrowded family situations, creating that additional more acute demand, and therefore temporary accommodation suitability becoming an issue, and the condition of that therefore challenging a number of residents. So example within BCP, we're updating our specialist and supported housing needs assessment to better understand the new supply we might need, and we need to be quite acute about where that needs to be, the type of accommodation that needs to look like, the design of that accommodation in order to meet some of those quite acute care and support needs that are not being provided within those current settings and within temporary accommodation settings. On the slide as well, there's some examples of how perhaps we can consider areas where we can improve in terms of working together using data and insight to target some of those households before they get into that more acute situation, and then information and advice and education around some of those preventative measures that we know are working in pockets that we might be able to scale and extend.
Thanks, Ben. I mean, the only thing I'd add from the does need mention to here is really where we go next around getting people and boards like this to engage. We do always want to encourage, and I think BCP will be the same. It's about making sure we get a direct line into our specialist leads in things like ref sleeper programs. So when there's particular issues arising through the health route around health needs and addiction or whatever, making sure that line into operational needs is as tight as possible. So that's been an observation from both sides to make sure we good conversations here. How does that translate into operational shifts? Conscious of time, so I'll move on to the next bit around housing development, just a little bit more around that. So I've said that there's been decent progress around individual sites. Obviously early days, the devolution agenda, but they should be good. Already starting to think about how we get into imagining a life where there's local, much more regionally focused decisions about allocation of cash and land for the programs of housing. So that's there's grounds for optimism around that. So the devolution of decision making from London to
to the southwest. So that wider piece around making sure we've got programs of new delivery that are broader than just statutory requirements. So that's I think I'm going to put a little bit of optimism around that. I'd just say from the Dorset Council perspective, because we don't have housing stock in the same way that the BCP do, we're about to take to our cabinet at the end of April proposals for new models of how we deliver housing across the piece. Big driver of that will be temporary accommodation, but it's again it's the opportunity for some influence and comment around how we make that as broad as possible. I should have mentioned that in the slide, but our driver to get out to stop using bed and breakfast emergency accommodation where we can. There will be some immediate and emergency use, but to get out of B&B, and again BCP are doing well on that as well. That will be a big driver, and that also has its health benefits if we stop using overcrowded short-term B&B. Move on. Unless you want to say anything, Dan?
I guess two things. One, because BCP does have its own housing stock, currently an asset management review of that and a development of an asset management strategy. We know a lot of our existing social housing is not fit for purpose. And there are opportunities as part of that work to consider, rather than retrofitting existing accommodation, repurposing or remodelling that accommodation to ensure that it better fits needs. And also within the housing development work, looking at existing land and sites and working with our registered partners to look at greater range of opportunities for development.
Yeah. Thanks, Ben. I was about to remind that because Paul sat across from me. I mean, our registered provider partners are absolutely critical to this, making sure we've got that engagement with the likes of Magna, around Astra, Sovereign, those large registered providers. We've got key partners in this area. Okay. Moving on to recruitment and retention, I think it's probably the area where we made least progress as a round table, because I think in some ways it's an individual organisational challenge around that with individual solutions. But we're still determined to stay together on this, and it's increasingly evident that work around economic development, economic generation within both with the wider Dorset. The links to essential workers across, so it could be a newsagent in a village, it could be a restaurant worker, as well as our own staff. There's pressure to make sure we don't just segment our approach to working people on low incomes. So that's something we need to be working through. And meanwhile, we have to address our own individual needs for social care and health staff in particular. So that's something that we work through, no doubt, within that transition from the left local authority transitions, but it stays as a priority because it's evident that isn't going away. We're struggling to recruit and retain because of the affordability of housing. Last slide, because then I'll stop and for any questions, just to share with people here where we're going next with the housing roundtable, because what I said at the beginning about it needing to have outcome focused operational outcomes rather than just being an interesting place to chat. So we're doing that, and by the strands that I've just explained. Matt Prosser, as most people know, is leaving the organisation. So what he's proposed at the last meeting that the chairing of the roundtable is delegated to me and Kelly Dean and me from DC and BCP, and happy to take comments here. Wanted to stress that part of this slide is to make sure we get the sweet spot between us being able to direct operational delivery more effectively, but also maintain that dotted line through our respective hierarchies and to governance boards. So it's going to be that's the twin expectation of both Kelly and me, is that we do that well. So we get operational focus, but we get that line back up into strategic oversight from places like here, Health and Wellbeing Board, and the various ICP, council cabinets and committees. So that's the task, and it's to do that through the people who are involved in the roundtable, so that it works for them, for their individual organisations, but we get proper and decent governance that gets decisions made and done.
Probably leave it there actually. So I'm happy to take questions. As you see, it's a work in progress. Better like ask questions now. It's an attempt to get some focus and actual focus.
Thanks, Andrew. I think I'm hearing things that are improving, and I like the idea of getting more structured now around, as we talked about, is what we're going to focus on, and some of the issues where, what does good look like? Getting people out of B&Bs and short-term accommodation. It's, getting some of those metrics around about understanding where we are today, and when we think we're going to get to a point when some of those issues are going to be resolved, as well as all the work that's going on to make them happen. Because I think we're in a situation now where we're hearing some good stuff, and we have heard some great positive outcomes as well. But it's understanding, are we making progress? From the conversation, I'm hearing some progress, but I'm then also hearing that some things aren't progress. So, that, I presume, will be part of the roundtable's work is nailing down what those look like.
It would maybe just answer. I mean, we could, whether it's performance information that you can see. I mean, I could speak to Dorset Council, but I think it's similar parallel progress on bed and breakfast and some very strong performance there, particularly when demand is rising. Reducing in both authorities, so we've got strong evidence to show progress as well as challenging.
And I think it'd be great for people to see that, because once you start to see those green shoots, you start to think, right, stuff is working. And I see some of it because I read some of the newsletters. A lot of people may not see that, so how do we evidence that? Make sure it's visible for people to see it, because so that they can support it. Yeah. I've got Pam and Paul.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm Pam O'Shea, I'm the interim chief nurse at the ICP. I think when housing is mentioned, it often triggers a really emotional response in people for a variety of reasons. And I'm just curious in terms of the approach, I suppose, really to housing, and actually the role of a population health approach in this space, because I think one of our reflections in the NHS, and I'm speaking in broad brush ways, we never seem to be able to access the type of accommodation that is meeting the needs of our population. So if I give an example, we have a number of people that we fund through continuing healthcare who, because of their underlying conditions, need a very structured environment, and yet we're in the private rental situation with those individuals where we're having to do huge adaptations at huge cost. And then equally, when we look at discharges from hospitals, the environment that housing has been, the traditional housing, isn't necessarily there to meet their needs as people get older. So I suppose in a broad way, I'm asking around, how do we approach this? Is there a more collective capital is needed in that space in terms of designing accommodation going forward? And I'm not saying it isn't there, I'm just asking.
So we take a few questions and then you can go back.
Yeah, so it's a moment of sort of reflecting on the comment made last one around the anchor work, and it seems like housing the place is part of the anchor work, and you said it's the hard thing to crack, but actually there's a lot of people whose main job it is to get into that space. And also reflecting on housing allocation policy, and essentially it's the point when properties become empty, and those are opportunity moments. And how do you grasp those from a policy perspective? Because I don't think you would prescribe the housing solution to, so if the NHS was in charge of the housing waiting list, it wouldn't be written the way it is. There's that combination of thinking. And then there's pattern book work, which is in this pattern books, ways of designing homes and estates which would add value to the public estate, and you could probably monetize that versus the more business process delivery models that house builders currently deploying. And obviously we've got examples where we're trialing and testing some of the stuff out. It costs more, so who pays, kind of thing.
I mean, we're getting quite technical with some of these questions, and I think they really should fit into the housing roundtable. Yeah. That's exactly where that sort of the question should come. I think the policy question is one that would be interesting to discuss here. Sarah, you wanted to come in, and I got robbed.
No, I'm fine, thank you, Cecilia.
Rob?
Oh, thanks. Well, I'll try not to get too technical, thank you, Andrew and Ben. A couple of declarations that I make. I'm interested in housing, as you know, and I chair the Housing and Finance Institute, a think tank on housing issues, and I chair an investment fund, Resi PLC. Areas are finding this hard, aren't they, Andrew and Ben? The government has put a lot of emphasis on planning reform to help unlock numbers, but really we're waiting on the spring budget to see whether or not there are initiatives to unlock housing issues. And so I think the first thing I just wanted to say, Chair, is this is really hard for the councils, and all areas are finding this hard. Housing is an absolute priority, and for us in Dorset, it will be make or break on whether we get the workforce we need, whether we get the skills that we need, whether we can have the economy and the hospitals we need. So I guess, Andrew and Ben, what can we do, in your view, to try and get you to the point where we can accelerate and have more oven-ready things to get over the line with, without thinking that it's easy? Because I know up and down the country, people are finding it very hard to get things over the line, even though there is an absolute priority that everybody wants to do so. So what can we do to help you do some big things?
Shall I start? Then Ben can help me out first.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. I'll maybe link Rob's question to Pam's earlier question, because I think that what can we do to help piece is really that links to the population health, the day-to-day shortages of the right housing in the right place. Because I mean that's partly what I think that's just what you're saying, Pam, isn't it? So I think to some extent the best we can do is around getting in early around long-term planning about how we get, certainly around how we influence, again, Paul's world, how we influence investment, if we get money from government, if we get money from Homes England, the various funding streams, is to make sure that's got the right type of housing designed in or built in, so there's grants available to it, and it will produce, it's long-term this, it will produce the type of housing that's going to be more suitable for people leaving hospital or with mental health, acute other health needs as well. So that it's getting in early with those strategic conversations about how we reframe ourselves with a new government and new way of working. That's why I'm trailing devolution has probably been a good thing. And if maybe partly answering Pam's as more operational, and from Pam's point of view, is there's decent work, good work, I'd say, going on across Dorset with BCP and DC and frontline people within hospitals to make sure we get as early contact with colleagues in housing as possible, because it has been, and we know different to most places around the country, was the conversation's often too late. People need to leave hospital, where they're going to go, because it's not appropriate back home. So it's about making sure that message is driven time after time. Is getting to have those early conversations.
Thank you, Andrew. I wasn't necessarily coming from there. I was thinking, what more do you need from us to help you?
Maybe that's that wide around the table around those long-term planning. I'd say this is a view, but I think it's one thing that I think Patricia Miller raised a while ago, the relative shortage of supported housing within our general patch. I think there is a debate to be had about how we get that, and including floating support type housing related support. I think that is a fair challenge that I think both authorities need to grapple with. So that's another area for us to get our collective influence together. Kind of briefly cover a bit of Paul's point as well about allocations policies, lettings policies for social housing. They are, I speak for Dorset Council, they're strongly driven by health and support needs already, but our own Dorset Council's allocations policies are going to be up for review towards the end of the year. So comment if you think it's light on aspects of it, then say so. But we do try hard to make sure there's proper prioritisation that people have health and care needs. Ben, I'm doing all the talking here. Do you want to?
Yeah, it's really obvious, but
supply is our key issue, isn't it? So when we have a property that may be suitable for a number of different individuals, we need to make a decision about whether it goes to somebody leaving the criminal justice system, a rough sleeper, somebody in hospital, and I can go on. That decision is, and our policies are needs led, and the waiting time is too long because our supply is not sufficient. Where on a very practical level, we see really good outcomes are where there is a multidisciplinary approach that is early, and where we can plan for solutions that provide care, support, housing input management. There is a plan around delivery, around whether that's in specialist housing, extra care housing, supported housing, or in general needs housing with floating support. Where there is a multidisciplinary approach to doing that, you get the best outcomes. And it's fair to say that we don't have that MDT approach across the system of housing need. It works in pockets, but it's not across the system. So that is an area that we could improve, and hospitals are an example of that, where there is inconsistency from my experience.
Just briefly, because that's one question, part of Rob's question I missed in terms of how you help. I think it's just that wide. It's the one public estate approach, the sort of sharing and the joining forces on assets, land assets, buildings. We make, as I said, it's piecemeal. We're doing bits, but we could do so much more around that. I think that's probably the biggest area of opportunity over time. But so wanted to get that on the record.
Thank you. Thank you.
It was actually to build on what Andrew just said and Rob's point. I think stepping away from the kind of conversation we've been having more into kind of workforce, one of the big challenges we're having looking going forward is the cost of workforce for our nurses and therapists coming down to live in the area. And actually the one public estate, Andrew, is exactly the way we need to go. Probably the only thing that when we've looked at it is that kind of join up through the local plan is key worker housing, not currently, I don't think, last time I looked, not listed as kind of one of the areas that we need to focus on. So is there a way that through the round table we can look at, can key worker housing be a part of, not all of it, but some part of that kind of joined up around the needs perspective?
Yeah, we've already tried to. That's something we can improve. But I mean, Steve made a good point as well. I mean, there's so many things we could talk about here, but there's sort of some of our initiatives around providing age-friendly. You want to talk about that, Steve? The age-friendly environment. And very quickly, otherwise I'll talk about it later.
I think we know that there's an awful lot of work for this group to do. We've had a housing roundtable. I think it needs to now, get some more oomph behind it. I don't know how I define oomph, but it's just a case of trying to get more people involved, more support for your multidisciplinary approach, people making sure that they're responding to the plans that are out there at the moment. The BCP plan is undergoing examination this week. Again, the challenges between the number of houses that we have, but having the right type of homes, the right type of accommodation. There's a lot of work here to do, and with the age-friendly sort of communities as well. So it's for me, it's how do we make sure that you get more resources to make this happen? We've been talking about it, I would say, for a year now. I'm seeing good progress, I think, as others are. But I think if there's anything more we could or should be doing to make, that's where we're all leaning in and say, okay, how can we help?
They may have the final word on that.
You may have the final.
Just in terms of that, because that's again, this isn't the ICP, is it? But I think it's about how we put that request demand, if you like, upwards. Because I think we can only go so far with current resources. Partly me and Ben and my day job, we can do a lot, but in order to push on, make quite a radical difference, it will need program support and some real. There's a question to be asked about how we want to join up a relatively small and modest amount of program and project support that could make a difference, certainly on the development piece, the one public estate piece.
And I think
carry on going piecemeal.
Given Rob's connections, I mean, for me, money, investment, investors, developers, again, are key to making some of these changes, I would imagine. So how do we work better together to utilise what we have here to really make the most of some of this? Okay. Now, given that I've failed in managing the agenda particularly well. Can I suggest that we take a break? Would you mind doing your presentation after item 6? Because I know you're here to the end of this session. So it's simply because I know that Karen can only make a very narrow window with us. So if we can just take 5 minutes and a break and quickly get back, grab a cup of tea, take a comfort break, whatever, and then quickly get on to that next item of the agenda, which is looking at work, activity and success, and then we will take our employment discussion with Rebecca after that. Jenny? Okay, thank you.
I am. I am. Present slides.
I think that's yes. I think that would be good. If you can do that, that would be great.
Okay, so thank you for inviting me along. I won't take any credit for this. This is all done by my team. I'm Karen Starkey. I'm the Interim Director for Children's Commissioning at BCP Council, and really pleased to be sharing this item with you today. If I'll just get my slide up. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, and obviously because I'm sharing, I now can't see if you put your hands up. So I'm more than happy to take questions as we go along. I'll assume that colleagues have read the slides and have a bit of a general sense of what the Holiday and Activity and Food Programme is, but I'm happy to go into that in a little bit more detail if you so need me to. Okay, are you happy for me to continue?
And if I can ask you to go through, as you say, you've provided the slides, people will have read them. So if you could go through the slides in about 10 minutes, then that'll give 10 minutes to really ask you some questions and get into some discussion. So that would be great.
I can do that. Perfect. Okay. So holidays, activities and food programme. So most people would say, what is it? So it's a programme that runs, as you would expect, during the school holidays, largely focused on children from underprivileged families and backgrounds to really engage them in holiday activities, get them kind of connected into services, but also to make sure that they have a good hot meal, and if they don't have a hot meal, at least having a packed lunch if they're going out on particular activities. So there's a whole kind of industry around kind of providing our kids with meals, but also enriching their lives in other ways. And there are a number of ways that we do that, which I'll take you through in the slides. But the overall aim really is to really engage with those children and their wider families, because obviously we do bring the families in and around that, but it is really about improving their health, particularly their well-being, particularly post-COVID, but also engage them more in learning activities, particularly for those children who have special educational needs and disabilities. And this covers all children, so whether they're in reception year all the way up to year 11. But the primary aim around this is for children who are receiving free school meals. So it's really important that our schools ensure that our children are registered for free school meals. We aim this at primarily those children as a gateway benefit. Although we do have the ability to open up some of those placements for children outside of those with free school meals, largely we do try to keep it to that cohort. And you can see the breakdown. Most of our places are kind of earmarked children in primary school, although we do offer it to all schools. 39% of our current places are taken up by secondary schools, and I'll come on to that in a little bit more detail. So obviously it's a grant. We go through a commissioning process. We're just going through the next round, actually. So it's up on our website for providers to apply. We are encouraging people to apply, although there are some challenges around short-term funding that we are just kind of bottoming out with the DFE. So we need to make sure it's procurement compliant. We need to do kind of reporting back centrally to account for the money. So it covers all of the usual things that you would expect. But the idea being that it really is to get to those families that are seen to be at the most need. So the financial overview, this is a pilot that's been running for a number of years, as you can see. So it started in 2018-19, went through the COVID period, and then there was a 3-year funding settlement that takes us up to around about now. There are a number of pilots that were shown to be really successful, that has kind of really emboldened the DFE to continue to fund this. They can see that there's a lot of benefit in that. And for BCP, just for BCP, that's had quite an impact in terms of income into the area over that period of 4.3 million. That's a lot of money for our local providers, and 90% of that has gone on direct delivery. So only a small amount in terms of kind of management equipment and staffing. The majority of that is earmarked for holiday clubs, food and activities. At the time of writing this slide deck, there was no funding pledge from the DfE. As you can imagine, the finances of kind of central government have all been in question over the last few months. We were advised by the DfE that they were going to make a commitment. We've heard today that they continue with the commitment. We just haven't got the final figure. So we know they're going to fund it for a further year, but you know, for our providers, that's a bit of a challenge, but at least one extra year enables us to look for a longer term funding settlement for such an important programme. Are there any questions at this point? I'll just pause. No? Happy for me to continue?
Yes, I think we're happy. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so there have been a number of national evaluations. I won't go into fine detail of this, but it pretty much says it's a really good programme. We should continue to fund and support our communities, although it does pull out some real challenges around the sustainability of that provision going forward with kind of really short-term funding timelines. It's not great for our providers when they need to get staff to not really have a good foundation in terms of their funding. But we know that, you know, the improvements in children's socialisation, their understanding of food, their real engagement with the world around them and getting involved in activities that they would never have an opportunity to get involved in is just really, really powerful. So, you know, the argument to continue comes from the national evaluation, but there have been a number of local evaluations as well. And I won't go into them in fine detail because they say pretty much the same things. So for BCP, we can see, you know, the number of places that we've made available is really quite significant over the course of a year. Sorry, is there? Okay, sorry, I thought I heard someone speak. So, you know, in terms of the number of eligible versus take up within this scheme, you can see that, you know, the eligibility is a roughly 60-40 split, but the primary age groups take up the most places. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we don't offer it to secondary school children. We do. It's probably not cool to go on a holiday activities programme, but what we do know is for the secondary school age children, the kinds of activities they do is quite considerably more expensive, so they get a very different offer. We are going to be looking to see if we can encourage greater take up in the secondary age groups for the next year. So we do a lot of one-to-one support. We support children with SEND. You can see quite high numbers of children with SEND. We keep, as I say, we keep this money really earmarked to those children with free school meals, but we do provide 8% of our places for children who aren't on free school meals. And that's the kind of model that we would be continuing with. Okay, so we've got 32 providers that work with us, and they are spread across BCP. They are aligned to the areas of deprivation, and you can obviously see by the chart there, you can see the areas where there are more deprived neighbourhoods, and that's where we tend to focus. That's where you would expect children who are receiving free school meals to live, although not exclusively. So we wanted to provide a whole range of activities across BCP. Okay, so you can, I think the spread is really quite a good success. So it's not just concentrated in one area. As we know, families do find it difficult to travel around. That can be quite costly. So they do need to be close enough to those families to be really beneficial. So you can see we've got a range of providers. We've got a fantastic network of providers that are really, really committed to working with us. They also secure external funding as well, and they are absolutely committed to ensuring that as many children as possible can use those placements. They do also, you know, because obviously the money is only only goes so far. They do find ways of including some children that are at risk of being excluded from that offer, and they do that at no cost to the local authority as well. So there's a really firm commitment on ensuring that those children can have that opportunity. So this is the best bit. You can see, kids having an absolutely fantastic time. The kinds of activities that most kids don't normally get to experience if you come from a deprived background. And obviously getting kids involved in this, it also starts to involve the parents as well, and gets them linked into wider support networks. So it's a really good way of connecting into those families in a way that is non-threatening. We can be quite scary. Children's social services can be incredibly scary. Most families would run a mile if they knew we were involved. However, this is an excellent way of linking in with those families to kind of engage them in early intervention opportunities. So some really nice activities there. And then enriching activities, learning how to garden, kind of understanding art, all the way up to, kind of learning how to cook. Whole broad range of activity that really does broaden a child's development, but also understanding the world around them, where food comes from, healthy eating and healthy activities.
Karen?
Yep.
I know you have to leave us at 12, which is only 7 minutes away, and
yeah.
And I think it's a lovely presentation. It's got all the elements that we're interested in. It's healthy eating, healthy activities, educating about food, social mobility, all of the wonderful things that we're really interested in as an ICP. I can see you've got local partners, you've got corporations, businesses involved in there. That looks absolutely fabulous. And we can see, the impact of those additional interventions with businesses, with donations or with money. What more can the ICP be doing, do you think, to be able to make sure that this remains a success? What can others do? How can we make sure that this is available to, other children beyond that cohort that you already have? It's fabulous, but, really more that we should be doing. So rather than us ask you questions, is that something that you want to focus on?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good question. Thank you for the prompt. I think, so the call to action really for yourselves is the opportunity to maybe enhance this either through maybe some opportunities around some funding. This isn't the most expensive program that we run. We could expand it even further if we had a little bit more money, and obviously we're having similar conversations with our corporate management team as well, and how this links in with the work that is being done to develop that locality model, really kind of getting underneath some of those wider determinants of health and how you can connect into those families on an early intervention model. How we link this into that locality model, they're linking to the family hubs, how that feeds in more broadly to the locality model. And if there are opportunities where you would think, well, actually, we could increase that funding, we could get to even more children, not just those that are on free school meals. We know that there are a lot of kids out there, holiday times, who don't have things that are constructive to do, should we say, and actually they are then at risk of those broader challenges around gang activity, drug activity, etc. So a question maybe around some funding and how we really see this as being part of the broader locality network model.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you. It's a really good example. I can see why you wanted to bring it here as a something that shows what can be done with, as you say, with little money, but a lot of ingenuity and a lot of ideas. So really impressive presentation, really excellent program. But does anyone have any? Yes, Sam.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. Just a couple of quick thoughts, and they're not solutions, but it's quite stark when you look at the funding for this compared with what we're currently spending on our SEND responsibilities, on our social care responsibilities. And again, prevention comes second. But as a country, when that need was identified during COVID, we did move and we did find the money. So I guess there's a challenge for us about how we turn that around locally, and we don't just wait until we've exhausted our primary response responsibilities, if that makes sense, before looking at what's left over in the prevention bowl. If we can find a way of starting to turn that around, I wonder how much of that future send provision becomes less costly, because we're reaching a really important cohort at a really early age, and we're doing the right things to build more confidence around social ability, speech and language, social confidence, so on and so forth. So it's quite stark, isn't it, when you look at what was further down the line.
It is. I'll take that back, and I have to wholeheartedly agree. I think the challenge for the local authority in particular, if you are aware of the challenge around the high needs block and the impact that that's having on the finances of the local authority, to start to unpick that it will take a little while, but we will find ways of continuing to invest in this, whichever way we need to do it, because we know it's really, really important, and it can broaden. It's such a good vehicle to build everything on.
Okay, I've got Rebecca and then Jenny, and then we'll let you go then.
Karen, I just wondered, is this going into the council's strategy to prevent people dropping out of employment, education and training at 16? Because I know both councils are currently writing what they call NEAT strategies, and this is a very early intervention opportunity to make sure that we avoid too many people falling out at that particular point.
That's really good. I've not seen it as a direct link, but I will take that back to the commissioning officer to ensure that there is a link. I think it's a really good point. And it also plays into the need to increase the take up in secondary level. So, yeah, thank you.
Jenny?
It's not a question for Karen, it's a question for us. And I just say it's picking up on Sam's point. I just wonder whether or not we could, as a system, really think about how we invest in the prevention agenda. And I know that's really difficult when we're all struggling financially and we think that next year is going to be even tougher. But even if we all committed to 1% going into prevention, I wonder what that impact would be. So it's a question for us, and I don't know how we work through how we get there, but it's a question I think we should wrestle.
Okay.
Karen, thank you so very much for bringing this. Again, it sparked a lot of thoughts, and that's making us think that absolutely we need to be funding these types of programs to get ahead, as you say, get prevention, make that left shift. It's a perfect example of what we can do, and honestly, how something can be built on so little money and yet be so impactful. So thank you very much, and say thank you very much to the team who's obviously done a lot of work behind this. It is great to see. Thank you.
You're more than welcome. Thank you for having me. You take care.
Super. So now if we can go back to our agenda item with Rebecca there, looking at the getting Britain working.
Work out my PowerPoint. So I'm going to take it that you've all read this, so we don't need to look too closely at some of the detail. This was a white paper published 27th of November last year by the government, and the whole aim is to increase working to 80% of the population. We're currently around the 75-ish mark of working population. So the majority of the 240 million that is available is actually going to mayoral combined authorities. And at the time this was published, I was feeling particularly, oh, well, we're never going to get one of those, are we? However, look what happens in the new year. And now we have a mayoral strategic combined or strategic authority bid in as a joint area along with Somerset and Wiltshire. So actually maybe when this paper, obviously this is already taken, but when there's something new, maybe we'll be at that front line. So we are going to see some trailblazers to try and help young people particularly get into the employment. That is an area that we struggle with at the moment. It's certainly not easy for some parts of the young population, particularly those in deprived areas, to find sustainable jobs. But that is going to be tried out by other mayoral combined authorities over the next 2 years. There is also 125 million for the NHS to look at how they work, particularly with, I think, accelerators, to make improvements that enable people to get into the workplace. You'll see from statistics in a minute that we have an economically inactive population, and a number of which are not so well. And then finally, the Get Britain Working piece is funding that will come to our areas across Dorset and BCP councils. It's 3.4 million a year through to 2029, and it will be delivered by Skills and Learning, who are based in BCP, but their accountable body is Dorset Council. So it's effectively a joint council delivery. So why have the government put this in place? So I'm just going to try and move the box that's on my screen, because then I can read what I've written. So we have a falling employment rate. I've actually heard, I haven't seen the stats to the end of December yet, but I've heard that that's going to reflect an even greater fall in employment and a rising economically inactive population, along with rising unemployment slightly. But particularly this 2.8 million of economically inactive people is something we've been watching going up since COVID. Within that population, we are seeing high prevalence of ill health. We find that people that are within that category have complex barriers, multiple complex barriers when returning to the workforce. They are likely also to have complex disadvantages. So a lot links in with the other elements that we've been talking about this morning. And we currently have 4.1 people working who have work limiting conditions. Ooh. So I thought it would be useful, as well as looking at the white paper, just to look at what Dorset currently looks like. And these statistics are pan Dorset. Forgive me, I didn't have them split by 2 councils at the moment. So employment rate at the moment, we're seeing about 78% here. You can see the split male-female there, female slightly behind, and the unemployment rate very low, 2.9. 2.1. That is actually lower than the national average, and that's fairly normal. We track to that kind of level regularly here. But then you look at the economically inactive piece, and actually that is somewhat higher than we may see nationally. We have had a bumpy ride with the inactivity, and some statistics you'll see actually put it higher, some lower, but you have to just take into account that the statistics for that are actually generated by a survey. So it's a survey that goes to households from DWP, and there has been a falling rate on the filling out of the surveys. And I was shocked to find last year that the latest survey only has 8% respondents. So it is a figure to be aware of. How reliable it is, I'm not sure, but it is the only figure that the government currently have to rely on. So, and as a workforce population here, it is clear that there is an element of the workforce or people of the workforce age that are not working. So I think we have to just accept that maybe the actual numbers maybe not quite correct, but we have something to work on. So taking those in, looking a little bit closer at those, I've always looked at them in terms of the reason. And then last year I changed and looked at it in terms of age, and it has quite a marked difference. And we were talking just before we came in here about the number of people over the age of 50 who are not working, particularly in Dorset Council area. And you'll see that 41,000 people over the age of 50, but within the working age bracket, are currently not working. That could be a chosen retirement. Could have chosen to move here and retire and be able to retire with and be economically viable. it could actually be that work has become too hard with the health challenges that you have, or other challenges. But these are areas of the workforce that we can hopefully use some levers to help more of those people get back into work if they want. A number of these people report that they wish to be in the workforce. So this is not forcing something on people. I also had a quick look at the female workforce, because that's always interesting, because it's interesting to look at those categories of why people aren't working, and you think, okay, care for older, younger families, what does that actually look like? But you can see that generally we have less females here in the workforce. But it's interesting when you look at the qualification levels, because within the chart on the left, you'll see that where females dominate may be what we would consider lower paid roles. But then when you look on the right and look at the qualifications that are in the workforce, actually females often have a higher level of qualification. So it's about how we enable people to have those opportunities, maybe. I don't want to solutionize through this process, but the opportunity, both for older workers and for females and for those that have complex health challenges, could be around flexibility, more flexibility in the workforce, how we advertise flexible jobs, how we recruit to those flexible opportunities. Probably is less relevant here, but overall, females are under earning males by quite a considerable distance, even though when you think about the fact that they may be higher qualified. Yeah. Okay, so getting back to what the actual white paper is proposing to do, this particular piece, the scaling up of the of health and the contribution from the NHS into the changes, this is in the white paper. This is pointed at the NHS. It's not particularly a partnership piece. However, I can already see that with Sam's work around smoking, that comes into here. The obesity. This is something that will go presumably to the new look ICP. Oh, come on, mouse. Okay, the next piece is around the 125 million to look at integrating the local work, but that is happening at a national level with the ICS accelerators, and possibly covered up the number of people. I think it's 8 different areas, mayoral combined authorities, primarily in the north. The two there with the gold stars, goldish stars, are what we will get here. The Get Britain Working piece is the 3.4 million. Now that is all about working programs to help people upskill, help them with their health, help with physical activity, and then help them into employment. It's a wraparound service. The service itself hasn't been exactly formed yet. Sarah Rice started in her new role as head of I actually can't remember the title, but she is leading skills and learning for BCP Council and across the delivery of this across Dorset. She is in the process at the moment of creating what a strategy could look like and then beginning that consultation period. There will be a series of tenders to find partners that can deliver here, and this funding comes from the Department of Work and Pensions, and up until now they have delivered other programs through help to work organisations like CTEC. Those programs are actually finishing, and so like other things that we see at the moment, there could be a small gap between what is delivered under this programme and actually the end of the current cycle of programmes. The Connect to Work piece, which is the next piece down, is to support groups around the country to look at what that Connect to Work is. There is no financial piece aligned to that at the moment, and there's no specifics as to where that will be. There is a youth guarantee piece, again, within the 8 MCAs at the moment. But what I would hope is that some of this feasibility work, some of the stuff we're seeing in MCAs may well come out to us in the next iteration of what this looks like. And then the pieces underneath are the things that we locally should be able to make a difference with. And one of those that we just mentioned there, or I mentioned, with regards to Sarah's presentation, is that healthy eating piece and the activity in the holidays and how that links into NEAT prevention. There's a lot of research around the fact that if you fall out of education, employment or training at the age of 16, then your long-term work and activity and your health, your positive health actually becomes at risk. So it's great to see that mentioned within this paper. But the NEAT prevention stuff is already happening in councils. It doesn't have extra funding, but it is something that both councils are working on and see it as a big priority. And then these last two pieces here are the national piece again, a digital jobs and careers service. We currently have a national careers service that is a helpline and a website. I'm assuming that we're going to see something, a refresh of that with more digital access for those in work and those out of work, and also an independent review commissioned by the government, which hopefully will push more of the activity that they find within this paper into whatever comes next. And then the last piece there, the last slide, is just what I am currently aware of is happening to support employability skills and who's working, where those pieces sit. They're all given by providers, and like Sarah just said, the providers of the HAF programme, they often get very short-term turnarounds in how they're asked to deliver. What I'm seeing at the moment is some real wobbles from providers who have been delivering very strongly for some time, but because there's currently no money and we're waiting on the new money, it's causing us, we are at risk of losing good people or good providers. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Rebecca. That's really insightful, especially when you look at all of those things that are going on. But yeah, the challenge around and then Emma.
Yeah, thank you. I'm quite interested in this area because I think it will be an opportunity, but you're quite right. At the moment, we haven't seen funding come to areas like this. There's a couple of things in my mind. First of all, you mentioned the opportunity to look at potential tenders through the 3.4 million. What sort of support services are generally going to be tendered? And the reason I'm asking that is because a number of years ago, DWP put out a number of national tenders looking for health support coaching organisations to do the health at work piece, to try to get people who were unemployed, partly because of health reasons or long-standing health challenges, back into the workplace. And I don't know how successful they were, but we do have a good integrated health behaviour change provider in Lidwell Dorset. They currently have a very, very small commercial business which looks at supporting health in the workplaces. It's not really scaled. It could be so much more. So at this stage, I'm just thinking through future opportunities. But if there's something in that space that we could explore, I'd be open to a conversation.
I think it would be really good, and linking you up with Sarah Rice and Skills and Learning. Lidwell Dorset, I think, already provide to Skills and Learning some of their other
They do some, don't they? Yeah. Capacity building, yeah.
The previous programmes that DWP tendered for were actually, I think it was the Restart programme.
Yes.
And it had relative success here, but people had to volunteer to be on it. They couldn't be prescribed. it. And it would be good to see more prescribed, not prescribed in a health, that's the wrong word to use in this committee, isn't it? But more direction to help somebody. Yeah.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Oh, yeah.
Mine's probably more of an observation, really, and is around the lack of mention around volunteering and the benefits that that brings into kind of getting people into employment and things like that. So, yeah, I'd be interested. We host the volunteer hub for BCP, and I know Volunteer Centre have it in Dorset Council area, and it's very underfunded, and there's so much scope for it to be able to do so much more in enhancing and supporting people into roles and giving people kind of hand holding, because actually a lot of people do need like just push or support to stay in work. They might be able to get there, but so it'd be really, I think.
Yeah, forgive me, I haven't put that on there. However, you are a big part of the Digital Skills Hub in Boscombe, and you're part of the delivery that we do there every Tuesday, the Community Connects. So I'm very aware that your programme does make a difference. Yeah, and across all age groups. I think that's a really important thing, actually, that people tend to think, oh, I need to volunteer when I come out of school or college or university to first job piece. But I think what I see much more is actually people at an older stage of life, and sometimes not looking for work, but just actually activity is really important through volunteering.
It also enables people to change kind of sectors as well. So in various areas you can kind of start volunteering, and actually it opens up a plethora of paid opportunities there as well.
Yeah.
Stop sharing your screen. And can I bring in? I think I can see Rob and Jenny. Rob.
It was a really great presentation. Thank you very much. One of the themes today across several items has been, how do we spend more on prevention? Jenny, you asked the question at the last item. And it's a funny old world, isn't it? That, if you don't mind me ruminating for a second, we're spending a couple of billion quid between us, but we think we can't invest in more skills, or we can't invest in healthy eating because we're waiting to see if we get a little bit of government money for it. And you, Jenny, asked the question, should we all commit to spend 1% more on prevention? And then we'll think about, do we want to spend that on diet or skills or other things? Probably if we did an audit of our organisations, nobody, the council, the hospital, nobody will probably be spending more than 3 or 4% of their budget on prevention. That's usually what comes out of such studies. So maybe just to park it with you, Cecilia, and your successors as chair, the two leaders, and with you, Jenny, and your successor, maybe we want to have a think about this and look at how much do we spend on prevention. Do we as a system want to move a sizable chunk of money as part of our financial planning mechanism into prevention up front as a sort of act of our budgetary planning, and then we work out what to do with the rest of our services, because that would then be the reverse of what we do at the moment, where these things are at the margin at the end of the budget and often get cut. So I'm sorry to ruminate a little bit, Cecilia, but I wanted to pick up on this theme that we're talking about prevention, but we keep coming back to the fact that we don't think we can resource it as well as we should. Sam made the point, Jenny made the point, etc.
I totally agree, and if there's one thing that I could leave behind, it would be the fact that we've really actively started that conversation about funding prevention, because it's the only way to make it happen. It doesn't it happens obviously with good people volunteering, trying to make this stuff happen, but it really does need investment. So absolutely. I've got Jenny, and then I think Leslie, and then Steve. Jenny.
So thank you very much. Firstly, thank you to Rebecca for the paper and taking us through the presentation. Great work. And the second thing I wanted to say is that you might recall when we started all of this, that we were really clear that the 3 key determinants to health and well-being are education, housing and employment. And it's not an accident, therefore, that we've covered those things off today. So the third thing for me is just to wholeheartedly support what Rob just said. I would certainly commit. I know I'm not going to be around for much longer, but we are going through the planning process and the financial process for 25-26 as health. And I will commit with Rob, who's one of the chairs that I will be meeting with on a weekly basis, that we should think about how we can put prevention first and then how we factor everything else around that. Because if we don't do that now, we will have another year when we're not doing that. So so I will commit to that. And if it's something we could all be thinking about doing, I think it will be helpful. The last thing really was just to go back to Rebecca's presentation. So I think the data that's in the presentation is really interesting, particularly around the economically inactive. And you indicated, Rebecca, we don't always know what that's about, but I guess I just wanted to add a bit of caution, and it might be something that we pick up in other ways. But I guess one of the benefits for somewhere like Dorset, particularly with an older population, is that we have probably many more people in our communities who are willing to volunteer. And so it may be that people have chosen to step out of the workplace in terms of being paid for work to utilize their skills in a way that they think is more beneficial. So I don't know how we capture that, but what I wouldn't want us to do is to proceed down the road where we talk about work just from an economic advantage, because there might be other things that really contribute to that broader prosperity for our communities, which you can't just necessarily measure by the income that people receive.
Yeah, I totally agree. This is just, it's one tool to look at that particular piece of the population. There are lots of things that you can do that will make you active in those times and active for your community and making a difference. But from a government point of view, I suppose for me, the bit that I've seen and I haven't reflected here is that the number of vacancies in the last 3 years has been enormous. That although 2020 it was a total slide, you write that year off, 21, 22 and into 23, we were desperate for people to work here in Dorset, and desperate in particular sectors. And so understanding how many people were choosing or needed more support to work was reflected in the fact that we just couldn't employ enough people.
I've got Leslie and then Steve, and then I think we'll stop this.
Yeah, and of course this brings us back to the discussions we've all been having about, transport before, accommodation, which for the workforce. But I was just going to come back to the sort of skills, because we've discussed this a lot at the skills board overall, and the sort of skills and learning agenda more widely. And we have had discussions about, obviously, the touch points for wellbeing and health don't have to be when you've had a primary incident or something. It could be actually in a learning environment. So we did. I remember us putting something together actually back in 2020 about having a community health and wellbeing hub around the learning and skills centres, so that we're getting probably a different type of population that are coming for a different reason, who may be perfectly healthy, but there's a point, isn't there, about how there are so many different touch points where people engage, and when we can be smart, whether that's through the community health and wellbeing hubs, whether it's through family hubs, whether it's through all of these things, that's the beauty, isn't it, should be a bit of this group of finding those touch points, the consistent messaging. So we might have Active Dorset involved in that, or Live Well Dorset, but it doesn't. I don't think it all has to be through the health lens, I guess, is my point. There's so many other opportunities to engage with people, to get them to know their numbers, to get them the barbers, all of the things that people have discussed before, which can be things that people actually actively volunteer to do within those settings. So I'm just sort of trying to change the lens a bit, but I think there's some real validity in that, and maybe that's the super duper things that Tom Hayes wants to hear. And I don't know, there's something in that too.
Absolutely.
Final one, love it, really great presentation. I think you lay out the need and the case of change really well, and what you're doing. I suppose the bit building on Jenny's point would be, what has the money invested done, and how can you demonstrate what's the KPIs, or what's the efficacy or the value that it's had, because then the point that Rob and others were making about the 1% is an easy conversation, and because you're going to say we're going to do this, but what has it done, or how have you demonstrated?
Yeah, getting statistics out of DWP
exactly.
is a massive challenge.
It's the challenge, isn't it?
Particularly where they're not, where I suspect a program hasn't delivered quite what they expected, and so I'm seeing things through this white paper that would correct things that they have already tried, like the Restart program. But the money here in Dorset should cater for up to 900 people per year to have a wraparound service. Certainly for the two middle years, I guess there'll be a run up and a run down at either end.
Well, even that, I suppose, like just building on that, if you take the 3.4 and divide it by minimum living wage, it's 150 people. So your ratio is, we're having a 6 to 1. If it wraps around 900 people getting back to work, then you're having a 6 to 1 value pound per buck, or whatever you'd call it.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I think we do measure the successes of some of the programs that the LEP has run, and we know about some of those metrics that we could possibly utilise as a way of measuring things. But that's a good idea, is to make sure that we show the benefits.
It's a good challenge.
Yeah.
I think we've got a choice here as a system to what extent do we view the total resource in our system as public money, because very quickly we'll be into making claims on where some of the resource is already invested. But going back to the chart that I showed, we're apparently seeing 1,000 admissions for coronary heart disease through those pathways, where previously we'd spec'd up secondary care to deal with 3,500. So I know it's complicated, but there's a resource use question there. Are we currently in a system that's fit for purpose, and could some of that resource be used differently? I'm not talking about taking money out of contracts necessarily, but some of those employees potentially could be working in the community to support more upstream working in partnership with primary care. So I think we have to be quite creative about how to find that prevention spend, because it's going to be really difficult for every organisation to say we're doing the budget and we're going to find an extra 1%. But I think there are other ways. We just have to kind of be organisation agnostic, which is a hard thing to do, isn't it?
Good point. One of the things that you did mention though was this potential gap in service. We need to be mindful of. If money's not coming through, old services are not going to happen because suppliers are feeling there isn't a sustainable contract for them. And how do we just keep an eye on where that might be causing us some problems?
Yeah, we're certainly seeing some of that now, and heard of different providers that have failed, or certainly a number of skills delivery agents. I'm going to highlight BCHA as an example. Their skills arm, they have reduced staffing quite considerably in the last 6 months because things are changing. And I noticed this morning that another private provider who had been working with Rockley gone into administration. So it's a tough market at the moment. It is a tough market. I'm hoping that when the apprenticeship changes are announced, that hasn't come out yet, that might help some of the private providers, because then it's
we have local authorities involved here. We have also the Guild Board as part of this. So again, through the work that that's doing to make sure that we try and keep a handle on this and don't miss out on any opportunities, but also people don't fall through the cracks in the meantime. Thank you, Rebecca. Really useful presentation, as you've heard, really helpful.
Sorry, I think it's Sally.
Yes, again, as Jenny had said, it's one of our key priorities to make sure that we stay on top of this. So thank you very much for taking that to us. We have our next item on our agenda is our Health and Wellbeing Board chairs, and I've invited both of our Health and Wellbeing Board chairs because a number of people get to see the Health and Wellbeing Boards, but a number of partners don't get to see the Health and Wellbeing activities. So it would be useful just to get an update from both of the places again in this forum. So are you going to go first, David?
Shall I go first? Yeah, I mean, conscious of time where we are, and I just wanted to give a bit of a verbal update from the BCP Health and Wellbeing Board.
Mhm.
We meet about quarterly. Our last meeting was last week. One of the key things we've been discussing actually over a number of meetings last year is actually about our Health and Wellbeing Board strategy and updating our strategy. And I think there's been no sort of appetite for doing a large piece of work and a big sort of detailed strategy, and Sam's been very helpful with this and actually had a survey of Health and Wellbeing Board members recently, which we reported back last week, and you'll be pleased to know that the overwhelming majority wanted to use the integrated care partnership strategy themes to shape our Health and Wellbeing Board strategy. So we're very much aligned with what the ICP thinking of what the ICP strategy is. Then there was a couple of requests to update on particular areas. I'll mainly just talk a bit about the Better Care Fund. Quite a few members will be aware of it, but some people might not be so much. The Better Care Fund is the delivery vehicle for person-centred integrated care with health, social care, housing, other public services to create a strong and sustainable health and care system. It's required by NHS England, require the Health and Wellbeing Board to approve the Better Care Fund plans and to report back to the Health and Wellbeing Board on a quarterly basis and have an annual report on how the money's being used. The annual report will be due later in the year, so it may be useful to have a sort of copy of that annual report for ICP members for awareness. It's a large fund. £75.5 million is what it's spending this financial year. Just to quickly run through the source of that funding. So there's disabled facilities grant is 3.8 million. Minimum NHS contribution is 36.3 million. Improved Better Care Fund funding is 13.4 million. There's additional local authority funding of 2.1 million. Additional NHS contribution 13 million. Local authority discharge funding of 3.1 million. And ICP discharge funding of 3.5 million. So it's £75.5 million this year being spent through Better Care Fund. So it's a big fund and it's doing a lot of work. But then when you divide that up, there's over 50 schemes in BCP that are being funded through that. So the reports are very long and detailed because it's looking at all of those different schemes and what's being spent and what they're delivering. There are quite a number of metrics that are used to sort of measure how effective it's been. The report back we had last week showed that one of the metrics is on avoidable admissions, and we're on track to deliver on that target. Discharge to usual place of residence was on track to meet that target. There's a metric around falls, and currently BCP we're not on track on that, so there's some work being done on that. And residential home admissions not on track to meet that target, so that's been worked on. So that's where we have the quarterly reports through the year and presentations to sort of see how it's performing. It struck me, the conversation on the last couple of presentations actually, when you look at the schemes that are funded, they're between sort of £500,000 and maybe up to 2-3 million. And the presentation on the holiday activities food programme, and he's been discussed about skills and learning, you know, those are similar to those sorts of schemes, and it made me think actually, well, we've got a Better Care Fund funding about 50 schemes to improve all of this care provision. Where we talked about prevention, maybe we should have a better prevention fund that has a similar sort of pot of money, is actually funding lots of different schemes through the year and is monitored and reported on through the year about how they're delivering in terms of the prevention agenda. And it's, you've got this model of the Better Care Fund. Just it might not work for prevention.
I like your thinking, again, pooling that one.
That funds lots of these different schemes, you know, £500,000 here, a couple of million there. That's the thing. So, but yeah, so that's one of the key.
And the Health and Wellbeing Board has oversight management of that, or
yeah. So it has to report through. It has to be approved for the coming year. What the Better Care Fund, how it's going to be allocated and how it's going to work. So it has to approve that. And that's a requirement of NHS England that it approves it, and it approves the sort of quarterly returns. There are detailed quarterly returns done to NHS England to show that we're on track to use the funding during the year and how it's being used.
Just one of the things that exposes is if anyone who has this idea that local authorities and their health system are not working together, I think this is absolutely showing that this does and has done for quite some time. I still think there is in some people's minds that that we should be working together, and this exemplifies the fact that we do and have been for some time.
Yeah, and the working together isn't just about individuals from the local authorities, social workers, and that working with health colleagues on particular things. It's actually, there are joint schemes that have been jointly funded to deliver on the health and social care agenda across the business. So yeah, that was just a bit on the Better Care Fund. There's also been quite a few discussions on integrated neighbourhood teams recently, so just a very sort of brief update on that. I'm probably not the best person to update on it. Dorset Healthcare are leading in terms of neighbourhood teams within BCP. I think it was taken to the integrated care group last week. I understand there's also a workshop last week with partners to sort of quite a few people there to actually look at the progress of integrated neighbourhood teams and how it was going. I know there's been some queries over the sort of forecast level of savings and the proposed pace that it's going at, and whether it's realistic. And BCP are very supportive of the whole scheme and part of that programme. I don't know quite what views were expressed last week at the Integrated Care Board, but certainly it's a sort of it's still a reasonably embryonic sort of area within BCP. I think it might be slightly different within the Dorset Council.
I think it got a very positive sounding out at the ICB board meeting. Yes, a lot of support for us as the new way of working, and again further making sure that we are working together at that neighbourhood level and working across functions to make it work.
Just a brief few minutes on.
Thank you. I think that is very helpful. Can I bring Stephen to do the Dorset side, and then we can take any questions or discussion.
Thank you. So sciatica and also a chronic cough. So multimorbidities, I think it's called. Yeah. I think it's worth mentioning with regard to the Health and Wellbeing Board that it is a multi-agency group. So it meets with the voluntary sector, the fire service, as well as NHS, as well as other groups as well, to actually find out what works within communities. And so the potential for working in a preventative way through the Health and Wellbeing Board is quite huge, because it's an existing structure that could actually do that. But rather than just say exactly the same as David just said, I'll quickly talk about what we're doing as Dorset Council as well as within that, so you've got some updates. You'll be surprised to know that we've been working on our strategic direction. How many times have we said in our agency this morning that we're working on our strategy? Well, we're doing that at Dorset Council, and the way that we're doing that is developing some new streams of working, one of which is Communities for All, which is about bringing people together of all ages, all backgrounds, all ethnicities, all educational abilities, so that we actually have a council that is meeting everybody's needs. Within the Health and Wellbeing Board, we are looking at our strategic direction. Hence my question earlier to say, do we really have to look at the strategic direction of something else as well? And Sam is leading on that at the moment, because as we move into a new government, a new administration, we want to actually assess that actually, do we need to be moving more to a preventative agenda, which is one of the things that is coming out quite strongly. And if so, how do we do that in a way that actually connects and communicates with the ICP and the ICB, so that we actually have a golden thread that runs through all of the work, so we're actually achieving the same objectives. In addition to the council plan, we're also developing our approach to our future working through something called our Future Council, which has got 5 work streams which are interlinked. 3 of them in particular. One of them is about the customer experience. So we're looking at how we reach communities and how communities reach us. So how we provide information and support as early as possible to prevent issues worsening and improving outcomes. We're looking at a strategic commissioning work stream. We are very good at strategic commissioning, I must say so. Not that I do it, but other people do it, and I think we are phenomenally good at that. So to support what we want to do, we're going to be looking at different ways of commissioning and providing services in partnership with our different providers, particularly including the voluntary sector. So there's going to be some consultation events coming up either late this month or early next month on how we actually engage with the voluntary sector. And rather than tell them what we want to do. We're going to listen to say, actually, there's a really brilliant piece of work going on over there, and showcasing that so that other areas can actually come to that, so can look out for that. To support this work, we're going to be more active in local communities and neighbourhoods. So we're going to establish some place-based, no, they're called place-based forums, which is not my favourite phrase because I can't say it, but that's where elected members, residents and community organisations can help shape how those opportunities develop in terms of local needs. So we'll go to Shaftesbury and say, what are the needs of Shaftesbury? And then get the people of Shaftesbury to actually meet those needs rather than actually being prescriptive. One particularly exciting thing we're doing at the Health and Wellbeing Board is thriving communities, which I think we've reported on previously here. It's something I wave a flag about a fair bit. That's a place-based model for working. So embedding place-based working and partnership will drive the delivery of better outcomes. The way that we're delivering that now, we've moved through the research stage for that. So we're going to work with alongside the integrated neighbourhood teams, develop something called the PERVIC Blueprint. So we developed something successfully in Weymouth and Portland recently, and we're going to be developing the PERVIC Blueprint, which is actually the INTs coming together with the thriving communities and other groups to actually do something that integrates together at local community level. So I am more than excited about that, and I am someone who gets excited about anything. Probably finally, almost finally, one of my first finalies, we're reviewing our day centre models. So to rather than have the old-fashioned traditional model where people come from all over the area into a centralised hub, we're actually moving to hub and spoke models. So specialised support is still being offered within the larger buildings because that's where it's most effective, but we're working to a hub and spoke model. So actually we're working to develop services in local churches, local voluntary groups, local wherever will have us. Local GP surgeries, we actually can do local support for local people. Very quickly then, the big thing that I'm really excited about, of all the things that I'm excited about, is recognising our demographic as the oldest demographic in the country, and actually celebrating that, recognising that and leaning into it rather than sort of like talking about the threat of ageing or the grey tsunami or whatever it's called. We want Dorset to be recognised as an age-friendly county. Registered with the World Health Organization, because we support it even if Mr. Trump doesn't, in terms of making all of our places, all of our areas and all of our services accessible and friendly towards people of all ages, on the basis that effectively that if you make something accessible to an older person with a walker or a stick, you're also making it accessible to someone with a pushchair or a pram or a wheelchair. And actually it's something that is effective for all ages, and that is, we're working on a whole council level. It's in our council plan, so we'll be working with highways, be working with bins, environment, we'll be working with schools to actually develop this concept of an all age friendly county. I say this is something that we really need the support of NHS colleagues, but others within the room as well, because it needs to be a cohesive strategic approach. Where a few other minor points of excitement, we are closing down some of our buildings, our care homes that are not really meeting what we should call modern expectations. So we're closed down a place in Bridport. We're knocking that down and building a state-of-the-art reablement centre, which is something to wave a flag about. We're also looking to buy a pretty much state-of-the-art care home as well, to be both a care home and a reablement centre in another area. That's ongoing at the moment. And that will work alongside something that is recent. I'm coming to a close.
I was going to say, you're finally.
One amongst my finalies now is something that we've also mentioned previously. Is something called our Newton Associates, our urgent emergency discharge from hospital, now called, and if you've heard it here, for Future Care, which is really exciting fanfare of a name. And that's about how we move people not just out of hospital, but we facilitate and help them whilst in hospital, preventing hopefully the need to go in the first place with preventative work, speeding up and coordinating care whilst they're in hospital, and then resettling into appropriate accommodation whilst they're out, and stopping them needing to go back in. So that is something that is underway at the moment. I wanted to say it's really working well. All I can get out of the team at the moment is positive indications are expected, which is pretty good going, I think, for staff teams at the moment. So by the end of Q1, we hope to be able to report on a very, very difficult winter period. In terms of general work, yes, case numbers are up 17%, but we're actually keeping within budgets overall. So it's a very positive outlook for what we're doing in Dorset. I could go on, but I will stop.
Thank you very much indeed, Steve, and David. I think it's clear that it's great to hear all of that work going on. So again, it helps people contextualize what they're doing and how they may be able to work in. I see in the chat that Jenny also likes the Better Prevention Fund idea. So I think there's definitely some support for that. The Newton work you described, the integrated neighbourhood teams working in both places. I think that's fundamental to making it work, is making sure that it's working across, Pandals as well. So yeah, I mean, it is early doors, but a lot of hope.
Real people, real lives. It's fantastic.
And it's great to hear your excitement and enthusiasm and for making those changes as well. If we're bringing in some new care homes as well as knocking down some old ones. Any further comments that anyone would like to bring in? I think what you've done is you rounded off what it is that you're doing, and it is that update, but it's useful to hear so that we can see the context.
I went to visit the area in Blanford actually recently, and actually sort of bringing excitement to care. And we've had some discussions, haven't we, around that? But actually, this is a really exciting opportunity. The difficulty was obviously that actually a lot of the patients were, to be honest, weren't well enough. And actually having somebody that's care led probably wasn't actually even sufficient. That was kind of quite striking. So how do we get to people early, right, or get the right sort of balance? But it was just so impressive to see care in that environment, and the approach. I think it feels like very futuristic to me of actually exactly how it should be, and it's very person centred and upbeat and positive, and really. So everybody hasn't been. I'm sure I think it's
the teams.
It's really, really great team. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's then the end of our main agenda for the today. I don't believe we have any questions from the public. Any other business that you raised earlier, David? Did you want to just reiterate your statements about what you want to do?
I think we covered it.
Okay.
There's lots of lots around the room.
Okay.
Expand engagement. We'll just start with a review and let's not take appointment.
Okay, that sounds good. Do we want to go through key messages from the meeting? Is there anything that you want to pull out for us?
Do a really quick summary, if that's
yes, please. Yeah.
That we've approved the revised terms of reference and agreed some further changes coming out of the new chairing and public health arrangements, which I will enact. We also approved the revised chairing arrangements and support arrangements, and the ICB collectively wanted to thank Cecilia for her leadership of the ICP over the past 2 years, taken a thematic approach to the other key messages, which is across all the papers that we looked at today. The real focus that was coming out was our commitment to the wider determinants of health, the non-medicalisation of issues, the potential need to increase resources, that was especially around housing, and how we drive that agenda forward, and the links to the work, especially on the holiday activity and food programme around prevention. And in relation to the Get Britain Working white paper, we really reiterated our commitment to employment as a key pillar to delivery of the ICP strategy. We agreed on the need for further conversations about the possibility of increasing spend on prevention as a system. We talked about the figure of 1%, and the need for creativity in finding that additional funding. We also welcome the updates from the Health and Wellbeing Boards, especially those plans to align the revised strategies and strategic directions along with the ICP strategy, and also noted the great work that's going on around better care funds, integrated neighbourhood teams and the Facebook partnership.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Great summary as always. Have we missed anything?
Could I ask that you add age-friendly
Age-friendly.
initiatives? Would be quite
And the better prevention fund. And I think again, I shall when reporting back to the ICB, will be saying that there was strong support for us doing something along that line. Whilst I'm nodding and trying to get people to nod along with me and say yes.
Yeah.
We should be.
Then we're starting with 75 million.
Yeah, 75.5 million to be precise.
Yeah, I think it's something to aim for. I think that's really super conversations taking us in the right direction. So thank you very much. I will be at the next meeting. I know it sounds like I'm leaving already, but I think I will be at the next meeting. So if there's any suggestions for our agenda items or anyone we have the work plan, but if there's something that we've missed off or something that you think you really would like to hear about at that next meeting, please do let me know. Otherwise, I would like to say thank you to everybody for your contributions to the meeting today. So some great discussions, and I think we are moving this agenda forward. So thank you very much indeed. Thanks to all online. Thank you. Thanks, Jenny. Hope the heat pumps go.